At 9:03 on Christmas night, my father's phone slipped from his hand and cracked against the tile floor of the resort suite. On the television behind him, CNN was showing my 9-year-old daughter Lucy beside me at a crowded Christmas meal, helping make room for people who had arrived with nowhere else to go. My brother had me on FaceTime, so I watched Dad stare at the screen as if it had accused him by name. It hadn't. CNN never mentioned my parents. About 14 hours earlier, Lucy had woken up alone in their house. The last text on her screen read, "Everyone agreed we'd have more fun without you. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting someone you love, stay with me." A few weeks before Christmas, I still would have told you my mother could be controlling without being cruel. That distinction mattered to me because I had spent most of my adult life protecting it. Linda Brooks liked plans made early, chairs assigned before guests arrived, and family decisions wrapped up before anyone had a chance to complicate them. If she changed a dinner time from 6 to 5:30 and forgot to tell someone, the mistake somehow became a problem for the person who had not adjusted quickly enough. I knew how to work around that. I was good at working around almost anything. Early that December, Mom moved a Sunday family dinner forward by an hour because my father wanted to watch a game later. She told my brother Aaron, but forgot to tell me until I was already leaving work. By the time Lucy and I reached my parents' house, everyone else had eaten appetizers, and Mom was irritated that the casserole I had promised to bring still needed 20 minutes in the oven. I could have pointed out that I had prepared it for the time we had originally agreed on. Instead, I apologized, turned the oven higher, found a salad bowl, and started fixing the rhythm of the evening. That was what I did. I adjusted. Lucy watched me carry plates between the kitchen and dining room, then followed me when I went back for serving spoons. She was 9, still young enough to whisper questions she thought adults might not like, but old enough to notice when something did not add up. "Mom," she said, "why did you say sorry?" I looked at her while drying my hands on a dish towel. "For being late. But Grandma changed the time." There was no accusation in her voice. That made it harder to answer. Across the kitchen, Mom was slicing bread. The knife stopped against the cutting board. "It's called being considerate," she said before I could speak. Her tone was calm, almost instructional. Sometimes the respectful thing is to make things easier instead of arguing over whose fault something was. Lucy looked from her to me. But Mom didn't argue. I felt the tension before anyone raised a voice. I had been feeling that kind of tension since I was a teenager. The instant when an ordinary room seemed to ask me which person I was going to disappoint. "She's just asking," I said lightly. Mom resumed slicing. "Children don't need to involve themselves in adult matters." Lucy lowered her eyes. I touched her shoulder and sent her to see whether her cousins wanted to play a card game. Then I set the breadbasket on the table, told Mom the casserole would be ready soon, and let the whole thing disappear into dinner. At the time, I considered that a successful outcome. No scene, no ruined evening, no one left angry. I did not yet understand that Lucy had watched me apologize for someone else's decision, and then watched me smooth over her attempt to name it. After dinner, when Aaron's family had gone, and Lucy was helping Dad put playing cards back in their box, Mom caught me alone by the sink. "You need to be careful with that," she said. "With what?" "The correcting. She's getting comfortable doing it in front of adults." I knew what she meant. She asked a question. She challenged me in my own kitchen. The old impulse arrived immediately. Make the distinction smaller, keep the temperature down, promise something easy. I told Mom Lucy was 9 and very literal, and that I would remind her there were better ways to ask things. Mom said she hoped so, because children who were allowed to question every decision became exhausting for everyone around them. I did not like the word exhausting, but I also did not challenge it. I wiped the counter, changed the subject, and went home believing I had prevented a fight. In the car, Lucy asked whether Grandma was mad at her. "She wants you to be respectful," I said. I was respectful. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She was not sulking. She looked genuinely confused. I know you weren't trying to be rude. Then why do I have to act like I was? I told her families sometimes had different ideas about what respect sounded like. It was the kind of answer that could get us safely through the rest of the drive without lying outright. I did not realize then that I was teaching her the same habit I had practiced for years. When something felt unfair, first search for a version that made the unfair person easier to understand. 3 years earlier, my husband had died, and after that, I became even more protective of whatever still looked like family. Grief did not make me helpless. I kept my job, paid our bills, got Lucy to school, remembered dentist appointments, changed smoke detector batteries, and learned how to do every ordinary thing that suddenly belonged to one adult instead of two. But I leaned on my parents more than I had before. They picked Lucy up when my hospital schedule ran late. Dad came over when the garbage disposal jammed. Mom remembered school holidays before I did, and kept extra pajamas for Lucy in the guest room. Losing my husband had taught me how quickly a shape you counted on could disappear. I did not want another part of our family to disappear because I had insisted on being right about something that could have been swallowed. Lucy trusted my parents in the uncomplicated way. Children trust adults who have been consistent parts of their lives. She had slept in that guest room dozens of times. Dad made pancakes shaped like letters when she was younger and still pretended not to remember that the L always came out looking like a boot. Mom kept a drawer with Lucy's hair ties, a spare toothbrush, and the strawberry lotion she liked. After my husband died, there were nights when I had been too tired to be good company for anyone, and my parents had taken Lucy for a sleepover so I could work a shift, fill out paperwork, or simply sit in a quiet house and learn how to breathe in it again. That history mattered more to me than the small frictions. It was why I did not hear Mom's irritation in December and think danger. It was why Lucy could ask on Christmas Eve whether they promised not to leave without her and laugh when Dad teased her. A child only makes that kind of joke when she believes the answer is obvious. So when Mom called a few days after that dinner and talked excitedly about a 2-night Christmas stay at a resort in Myrtle Beach, I accepted the plan as a gift. Aaron and his wife would drive down separately with their children. Mom and Dad would leave early Christmas morning with Lucy. I had volunteered for a short early coverage shift at the hospital. Then I would return to my parents' house, change clothes, grab my bag, and drive down alone. Lucy had never spent Christmas at the beach. She talked about it for days. Not the ocean itself. December was too cold for the kind of beach day she imagined in summer. But the indoor pool, the hotel breakfast, the idea of waking up the next morning somewhere with an elevator and a balcony. She packed and repacked a small overnight bag as if we were going overseas. Christmas Eve at my parents' house was warm enough to make every earlier irritation seem petty. That was another reason I trusted them. Mom made roast chicken and sweet potatoes. Dad found the old box of ornaments that had survived every move since Aaron and I were children. Lucy hung a wooden angel she had made in first grade near the bottom of the tree because she said that was where she could see it best. Dad teased her about packing 3 pairs of socks for 2 nights, and Lucy informed him that hotel air conditioning was unpredictable, a word she had picked up from me. For a few hours, I could look around that house and believe the family I had fought so hard to keep intact was intact after all. I handled the little things without noticing I was handling them. I checked that Aaron had the reservation number. I moved 2 wrapped gifts out of the hall so nobody would trip over them before dawn. I made sure Dad's phone charger was in the side pocket of his suitcase, because he had already asked twice where it was. Mom went through the departure plan while wiping the kitchen counters. "We want to be on the road a little after 6, she said. "Traffic should be light." "I'll be gone before Lucy gets up," I said. "My shift starts at 5. "We'll wake her," Dad said. Mom nodded. "She'll come with us. You can meet us there when you're done." Lucy was sitting at the table with a mug of hot chocolate, listening to every word. "You promise you won't leave without me?" she asked, grinning. Dad put a hand to his chest. Do you think your grandfather wants to listen to you complain for the next year? She laughed. Mom smiled too. No one is leaving without you. There are promises that sound important when they are made, and promises that only become important after they are broken. At the time, that sentence barely registered. Before bed, Lucy and I went into the guest room. Her clothes were folded on a chair: leggings, a red sweater with a small silver snowflake on the front, sneakers underneath. Her overnight bag sat zipped near the door. On the nightstand was a digital alarm clock with square blue numbers. "What time?" she asked. "6. That's early. You want hotel pancakes or not?" She made a face, then pressed the buttons while I watched. The display changed to 6:00 a.m. I checked it once because I knew how easily she hit the wrong button when she was sleepy. 6, I said. 6, she repeated. I tucked the blanket around her, kissed her forehead, and told her I would see her at the resort that afternoon. She reminded me to bring her swimsuit from the dryer at home. I told her I already had it in my bag. When I stepped into the hall, Mom was turning off the downstairs lights. She asked whether Lucy was set. "Alarm's at 6. Her bag is by the door." "We've got her," Mom said. I believed her. At 4:35 the next morning, the house was dark except for the tree lights and the small lamp Mom always left on over the stove. I moved quietly because everyone was asleep. I had showered the night before and dressed in the bathroom so I would not wake Lucy. Before leaving, I stood outside the guest room door for a moment and considered going in to kiss her goodbye. I did not. She had another hour and 25 minutes to sleep. Dad's SUV was in the driveway. Their luggage was stacked near the front door. Lucy's little bag was beside it. Everything looked exactly as it should. I drove toward Raleigh under a sky that had not begun to lighten. The roads were nearly empty. Christmas lights blurred past the edges of neighborhoods, bright against dark porches. At the hospital, the lobby decorations looked different from decorations in a home garland fastened to a reception desk. Paper snowflakes taped to glass, a battery-powered tree glowing. Me, side a row of wheelchairs. The building never truly slept. So holidays arrived there as decorations around the work rather than a break from it. I supervised ER registration, which meant my Christmas morning was supposed to be short but busy. One employee had called out earlier in the week, and I had agreed to cover the opening hours until replacement staffing arrived. I had done enough holiday shifts to know that plans could change quickly, but that morning started quietly. I checked the assignment board, helped resolve an insurance information problem at registration, and showed a newer employee where a stack of translated forms had been moved. My phone stayed face down near my keyboard. At 5:50, I thought of Lucy waking in 10 minutes. At 6, I pictured Dad pretending he was in a hurry while moving at exactly the speed he always moved. Mom checking the locks twice. Lucy coming downstairs with her sweater half on, and complaining that no one should be awake before sunrise on Christmas. I smiled at the image and kept working. At 6:20, I expected them to be on the road. At 6:45, I got a routine message from Aaron, wishing me Merry Christmas and saying they had started driving south. I sent back a tree emoji and told him I would see everyone later. Nothing in me was alarmed. That matters because people sometimes think betrayal announces itself. They imagine some instinct should have warned you. Some small detail should have felt wrong enough that you could have stopped what came next. But trust is ordinary while you are inside it. I had left my daughter sleeping in my parents' house because there were 2 adults there who had loved her since the day she was born. I did not spend the next 2 hours imagining ways they might hurt her. I worked. A few minutes after 7, my phone vibrated. I glanced down and saw Lucy's name. I almost let it ring once more because I was finishing a note for the day supervisor. Then I remembered she was probably calling from the car to complain that Grandpa would not let her pick the music. I answered, "Hey baby, Merry Christmas." For a second, there was only breathing. Then Lucy said, "Mom?" Her voice was wrong. I stood up so quickly my chair rolled backward. What happened? Are Grandma and Grandpa with you? The question made no sense. No, they're with you. No, they're not. I stepped away from the desk, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. Where are you? At their house. I remember looking at the wall clock, as if the numbers could correct what I had heard. Is Grandpa outside? Did you check the garage? The car's gone. Her voice cracked on the last word. I walked into the small corridor beside registration, where I could hear her without the noise of printers and doors opening. Lucy, listen to me. Stay inside. Lock the door if it isn't locked. I'm coming. They left my bag. I closed my eyes. Her overnight bag. The one that had been sitting beside my parents' luggage when I left at 4:35. What do you mean they left your bag? It's still here. I heard her take a shaky breath. Then she said, I texted Grandma. What did she say? Another pause. I sent it to you. My phone buzzed against my cheek as the forwarded screenshot arrived. I told Lucy to stay on the line. With trembling fingers, I opened the image while keeping the call connected. The first message had been sent from Lucy's phone shortly after 7. Where's everyone? It looked exactly like something a 9-year-old would send after waking in a house that should have been full of adults. Below it was my mother's reply. Everyone agreed we'd have more fun without you. For a few seconds, I could not make the sentence fit the woman I had eaten dinner with the night before. I read it again. The words did not improve. Not we had to leave early. Not there was a change of plans. Not call your mom. Everyone agreed. I leaned against the wall. Mom? Lucy said. I'm here. Did I do something? No. The answer came out before I had time to soften it, and I was glad. Did I make Grandma mad at dinner? No, Lucy. But why would they? I don't know yet. That was harder to say. I was the person who always knew how to translate my mother. I could turn sharpness into stress, favoritism into habit, control into concern. I had spent years giving other people the least damaging explanation available. There was no least damaging explanation for that text. I told Lucy again that I was coming home. I found the supervisor taking over the next block of coverage and explained only what I needed to. My 9-year-old was unexpectedly alone, and I had to leave. No drama, no family history, just the fact. As I gathered my things, I kept the screenshot open. The timestamp mattered. The wording mattered. The fact that Lucy's bag was still by the door mattered. But I still did not know what had happened inside that house after I left. I did not know why Lucy had awakened an hour later than planned, or whether the clock had been changed intentionally, or whether my father had known what my mother was going to say. I did not know what Aaron or anyone else at the resort had been told. And because of that, one possibility was still sitting in the middle of everything, ugly and enormous. Maybe Mom had meant exactly what she wrote. Maybe everyone really had agreed. I was halfway through the employee exit when another message from Lucy appeared. It was not angry. There were no exclamation points. No accusations. Mom, did everyone really agree? I stopped walking. All my life, whenever someone in my family was hurt, I had known what to say to make the room easier to live in. That morning, for the first time, I had no answer. By the time I reached the employee parking lot, Lucy's question was still on my screen. Mom, did everyone really agree? I could not answer it from the hospital, and I could not answer it from the driver's seat. I called her before I pulled out and told her again to keep the doors locked, stay inside, and keep her phone with her. She said she was sitting on the bottom step by the front door, because that was where she could see the driveway. The detail hurt in a way I did not expect. She was still waiting for someone to come back and make the morning make sense. I drove faster than I should have on roads that were nearly empty, then forced myself to slow down because getting stopped or worse would not get me to her sooner. The sunrise was beginning to thin the darkness by then. Houses along the route had wreaths on doors, and inflatable snowmen leaning in still yards. Everything outside my windshield looked like Christmas morning. Inside the car, it felt like something had already ended. I kept thinking about the hour between 6 and 7. At 6, Lucy had been supposed to wake up. At 7, she had woken alone. That was the only piece I could not fit. I had watched her set the alarm. I had checked the display. 6 o'clock. There was no reason for it to be an hour late unless someone had touched it after I left. When I reached my parents' house, Lucy opened the front door before I had finished walking up the driveway. She had locked it the way I told her to. Her red Christmas sweater was on, but only one sleeve had been pulled properly over her wrist. Her hair was unbrushed, and the sneakers she had set out the night before were still under the chair in the guest room. She had put on socks and then stopped somewhere in the middle of getting ready. The overnight bag was exactly where she had said it was. It sat beside the entry table, zipped, with the little luggage tag she had made from pink cardstock hanging from the handle. My parents' larger suitcases were gone. So was Dad's SUV. The empty space beside Lucy's bag made the decision visible in a way the text message had not. I crouched and held out my arms. Lucy came into them without speaking. She did not cry right away. She pressed her face against my shoulder and stayed very still, as if crying would make something official. I could feel the cold from the front hall through the knees of my work pants. "I'm here," I told her. She nodded against me. When she finally pulled back, the first thing she said was, "I didn't change my mind. I know. I wanted to go. I know that too." Her eyes moved toward the bag. "Grandma told you I didn't?" I don't know what she told anyone yet. I hated having to say that, but I was done inventing answers before I had facts. Lucy led me upstairs. The guest room still looked like Christmas Eve had paused in the middle of itself. The blanket was folded back. Her clothes from the night before were on the chair. The small digital clock on the nightstand glowed 7:26. I picked it up. The alarm setting showed 7:00 a.m. I pressed the button again to make sure I was reading the correct function. 7, not 6. Lucy stood beside me watching my face. "You said 6, she said. "We set it to 6. You checked it." "Yes." I thought maybe I did it wrong. That sentence stopped me. She was 9 years old, abandoned in a house on Christmas morning, and one of her first instincts had been to wonder whether she had caused the thing that happened to her. "You didn't," I said. "I watched you set it." I put the clock back down carefully, because the anger in my hands made me want to do something stupid with it. Then, I asked Lucy to tell me only what she remembered. Not because I doubted her, but because I needed to understand the sequence without filling in gaps myself. She said the alarm went off and she saw 7 on the clock. She got dressed part way, went downstairs, and thought her grandparents were in the kitchen. When no one answered, she checked their bedroom, then the garage and driveway. She saw the luggage was gone. She found her own bag still by the door. Then she texted my mother. Nothing in her account sounded dramatic. That made it worse. It was a child describing the ordinary steps she had taken to find the adults who were supposed to be there. Downstairs, I took Lucy's phone and read the message thread directly. "Where's everyone? Everyone agreed we'd have more fun without you." No extra explanation followed. No correction. No, "I'm sorry, that came out wrong." My mother had left the sentence sitting there for a 9-year-old to carry by herself. I gave the phone back to Lucy and went into the kitchen. I needed something physical to do while I decided what came next. I filled the kettle, then realized neither of us wanted tea, and turned it off. I opened the refrigerator and found the breakfast casserole Mom had prepared for the road. I closed the door again. Lucy climbed onto one of the stools at the island. "Did Grandpa agree too?" she asked. "I'm going to find out." "Did Uncle Aaron?" "I don't know." "The cousins?" "I don't know." She looked down at her hands. I had never hated the phrase, "I don't know," as much as I did that morning. But every false reassurance would have put me back into the same role I had always played, translating before I had listened, softening before I had understood. I opened my own phone and pulled up Mom's contact. My first impulse was to call. I could already hear how that conversation would go. Interruption, defense, my voice rising, hers becoming colder, Dad telling us both to calm down. 15 minutes later, I might know less than I knew now. So I sent one question. Did you change her alarm from 6 to 7? The typing indicator appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then came back. Yes. I stared at the single word. Another message followed. We needed to get on the road. She was already making everything into an argument lately, and neither your father nor I wanted another scene before dawn. My chest tightened. I typed back, "You changed it so you could leave before she woke?" "Yes. You were almost done with work anyway." She was not going to be alone long. Robert agreed it was easier this way. There it was. Not a malfunction. Not Lucy pressing the wrong button. Not my mother forgetting the plan. She had changed a 6 to a 7 because 7 bought them enough time to leave. I read the message twice, then set the phone face down on the counter. Lucy was still watching me. Did she do it? Yes. The word felt different coming out of my mouth than it had on the screen. Lucy swallowed. Why? I looked at her and chose the narrowest truth I actually had. She says she didn't want an argument before they left. I wasn't going to argue. I know. I was asleep. I know. That was the part that made the logic so ugly. Mom had not avoided an argument. She had prevented Lucy from having any chance to know she was being excluded until exclusion was already complete. I picked up my phone again. Mom had said Dad agreed. I was not going to accept that as proof, simply because she had written it. I opened a separate message to him. Did you know Mom changed Lucy's alarm from 6:00 to 7:00 so you could leave before she woke? His answer took longer. Yes. I waited. Then another message came. We both thought it would be easier. You were going to be back soon. This didn't need to become a Christmas disaster. I typed, "You agreed to leave her asleep in the house?" His reply came back almost at once. "Sam, she knew you'd be back soon. Don't ruin everyone's day over an hour. Come down here and we'll talk like adults." For several seconds, I just looked at the screen. Dad had always been the softer one. That was the role I had given him. Mom decided. Dad made the decision sound reasonable afterward. Mom sharpened. Dad rounded off the edges. I had spent years treating that difference as proof he was separate from whatever had happened. But this time, he had given me the answer himself. He knew. He agreed. And his concern was already shifting from what they had done to what I might do with it. I walked into the front hall and looked at the 2 bags. Lucy's little pink-tagged one. Mine, a dark canvas duffel I had left near the coat closet because I had planned to change after work and drive straight to Myrtle Beach. The route was still in my phone from the night before, roughly 3 hours. I could picture the rest of the day with painful clarity. Finish dressing Lucy, load both bags, start driving south, arrive angry, walk into the resort with everyone watching, demand an explanation, listen to Mom explain that she had been trying to teach respect, listen to Dad tell me nobody meant any harm, then spend the rest of Christmas managing the discomfort their decision had created. That was what I knew how to do. Part of me had already started doing it. I opened my duffel to make sure my charger was inside. I checked for Lucy's swimsuit, even though I remembered packing it. I looked toward the stairs and mentally calculated how long it would take her to finish getting dressed. I was preparing to chase them before I had consciously decided to go. Lucy came into the hall. "Are we going there?" I looked at her. "To the resort?" She nodded. Then, very quietly, "To the people who didn't want me?" The duffel was open at my feet. I closed it. No. She watched me as though she had not expected the answer. I stood up. We are not spending Christmas chasing people who chose to leave you behind. I did not say it loudly. I did not send the sentence to my parents. I did not post the screenshot. I did not call Aaron and demand he choose a side. The decision was between me and my daughter before it belonged to anyone else. Lucy looked toward the front door. What are we doing then? That question was harder. Not going to Myrtle Beach solved one problem. It did not give a 9-year-old a Christmas. For a few minutes I considered taking us home. Our tree was there. Her gifts were there. I could make pancakes, put on a movie, let her open everything early. There would have been nothing wrong with that on an ordinary holiday. But I could already picture the quiet. I could picture Lucy sitting in our living room wondering what her cousins were doing at the resort. Every pause would become space for the same question. Did everyone really agree? The house around us made it worse. My parents' stockings were hanging from the mantel. The gifts they had wrapped for Lucy were still under the tree. A tray of cinnamon rolls sat covered on the counter. The room was full of evidence that she had been expected right up until someone decided she was not. I did not want her spending the day inside that decision. Then I remembered Marlene Ortiz. Marlene coordinated an annual Christmas meal in Raleigh that our hospital had supported for years. It was not a shelter event in the dramatic way people sometimes imagined holiday charity. It was simply a large community meal for older adults, families between places, hospital staff finishing shifts, people living alone, and anyone else who needed somewhere warm to be. I had volunteered there twice before and helped collect supplies other years. 3 days earlier, Marlene had sent a general message to several of us, asking whether anyone could still take a late volunteer slot. I had told her no because I would be in Myrtle Beach. That answer no longer applied. I found the message and called her. Marlene answered over a wall of noise. I could hear metal pans, voices, something being dragged across a floor. Merry Christmas, Sam. Merry Christmas. This is last minute, but do you still need hands? She laughed once. I have never stopped needing hands. I've got Lucy with me. Bring her. We'll put both of you to work somewhere safe. I hesitated. Our plans changed. She did not ask for the story. Then come have lunch with us. That simple lack of curiosity felt like kindness. She told me they were still setting tables and organizing serving stations. A local television crew was scheduled to stop by later for the annual holiday piece, she added, mostly because she wanted volunteers to know not to leave personal bags in the main aisle. Her tone made it sound like one more logistical nuisance along with extension cords and coffee urns. Ignore them and keep moving, she said. That's what we do. I told her we would be there. When I hung up, Lucy was standing beside the tree. Who was that? Miss Marlene. Remember the Christmas meal I helped with before? The one with the giant mashed potatoes? I smiled despite myself. Those were normal mashed potatoes in giant pans. They looked giant. She needs help today. Lucy considered it. Do we have to talk to people? Only if you want to. Do they know about Grandma? No. That answer seemed to matter. What would I do? Probably napkins, maybe place cards. Something extremely important and badly paid. Her mouth moved at one corner. It was the first almost smile I had seen since I walked through the door. Can I wear my Christmas sweater? You are already wearing half of it. She looked down and finally noticed the twisted sleeve. For the first time that morning, she laughed a little. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it changed the room. We ate something before leaving because neither of us had breakfast. Lucy chose toast with peanut butter, not the casserole in my mother's refrigerator, and not the cinnamon rolls waiting for the trip that never happened. I made coffee and drank only half of it. While she ate, I finished getting her ready, not as if we were salvaging the resort plan, but for somewhere else. She brushed her hair at the downstairs mirror. I helped with a knot near the back. She put on her sneakers and then paused beside her overnight bag. Do I leave this here? The question carried more weight than a bag should have. Yes, I said. We're not going to the resort. She took the pink tag off the handle and put it in her coat pocket. I did not ask why. Before we left, I sent my parents one message. Lucy is with me. We are not coming to Myrtle Beach today. Mom called within seconds. I let it ring. Dad called next. I let that ring too. Then Mom sent a text telling me not to make the situation bigger than it was. Dad followed with another asking me to come down and discuss it in person, so everyone's Christmas did not get ruined. I read both messages and put my phone away. For most of my life, messages like that had worked because they converted another person's choice into my responsibility. If I stayed away, I was ruining Christmas. If I arrived angry, I was creating tension. If I wanted an apology before sitting down to dinner, I was making everyone uncomfortable. That morning, for the first time, I did not argue with the premise. I simply refused the assignment. Lucy and I drove toward Raleigh with the resort behind us in every sense except geography. She was quiet for most of the ride. Once, she asked whether her cousins had already reached the beach. I told her I did not know. Another time she asked whether Grandma was going to be mad that we did not come. I told her Grandma was responsible for her own feelings today. Lucy turned that over without answering. We did not sing along with Christmas music. I did not try to manufacture cheer. There are moments when insisting a child be happy becomes another way of asking her to make adults comfortable. I let the morning be hurt and strange and unfinished. But it was moving. That mattered. The community center parking lot was nearly full when we arrived. Volunteers were unloading foil-covered trays from car trunks. Someone had taped red arrows to the glass doors. Through the windows, I could see long rows of folding tables, paper tablecloths, garland looped along the walls, and people moving quickly between them. The room did not look elegant. It looked useful. Marlene met us just inside, wearing a green apron over a sweater and carrying 3 rolls of painter's tape under one arm. "You came," she said. "We did." She hugged me briefly, then bent enough to greet Lucy without talking to her like she was 5. "I hear you're available for highly skilled napkin work." Lucy nodded solemnly. "Depends on the benefits." Marlene looked at me. "You raised a negotiator." "Apparently." She handed Lucy a stack of folded red napkins and pointed us toward the main hall. I had expected the noise to overwhelm her. Instead, Lucy slowed just inside the doorway and took everything in. Volunteers were setting water pitchers on tables. An older man in a Santa hat was untangling extension cords. 2 teenagers carried boxes of dinner rolls toward the kitchen. Near the far wall, several folding tables had been arranged beyond the main decorated room, separated from the others by a wide doorway and a strip of hallway. A volunteer was placing plain paper signs on those tables. Overflow. Lucy stopped walking. I followed her gaze. Several chairs had already been set there, away from the center of the meal. She looked up at me, then toward Marlene. "Are those people supposed to eat by themselves?" Marlene followed Lucy's gaze to the overflow tables. "No," she said. "Not if I can help it." She sounded tired rather than dramatic. Nobody had designed the extra tables to humiliate anyone. More people had arrived than expected, and the crowded hall needed a practical solution. Lucy still frowned at it. "Then why are the tables over there?" Marlene shifted the painter's tape under her arm and looked toward the main room. "Because I ran out of room." Lucy looked again through the wide doorway. "There's room if you move that." She pointed at a long folding table covered with extra coffee supplies and stacks of paper cups. Beside it were 2 smaller serving tables positioned at angles that created a dead space no one was using. I almost told her not to worry about it. That reflex rose fast. Don't make yourself difficult. Don't question the person in charge. Don't turn a small problem into something bigger. Then I stopped. Marlene did too. She looked where Lucy was pointing, then called over one of the volunteers who handled the room setup. The three of us stood there for less than a minute before the solution became obvious. If the coffee station moved against the side wall, one serving table shifted closer to the kitchen doors, and 2 rows were turned 90 degrees, the overflow tables could come inside the decorated room. It would be tighter. People would have to walk carefully. But nobody would have to eat in the hallway. Marlene exhaled through her nose. All right, we can do that. Lucy looked at me, surprised that the answer had been yes. Nobody applauded or told her she had changed Christmas. The room simply got busier, which was exactly what she needed. Several adults handled the heavy tables. I helped move chairs and checked that the aisles stayed wide enough for people using walkers. Lucy carried napkins from one table to another, gathered place cards that had already been set out, and lined them up on the floor until we knew where the new seats would go. A volunteer handed her a roll of tape and asked her to attach small table numbers to the ends of the rows. She took the job seriously enough to straighten each one twice. Soon, the plain overflow signs were gone. The first late arrivals came in while we were still finishing. An older couple stepped through the doors with matching canes. Behind them was a mother with 2 children wearing winter coats over pajamas, followed by another family carrying a foil-covered pie, as if they were embarrassed to arrive with something instead of empty-handed. Marlene greeted them the same way she greeted everyone else and pointed them toward the main hall. Lucy watched until they sat down among everyone. Then she returned to her napkins. That morning, Lucy had been the person left outside the plan. By noon, she noticed immediately when someone else was about to be placed apart from the group. Here, when she asked why, nobody punished her for asking. It did not repair the empty house, but it gave Christmas another fact to hold beside it. Someone listened. For the next few hours, we worked. I was assigned to a serving line for a while, then helped refill water pitchers and carry empty trays back toward the kitchen. Lucy alternated between napkins, place cards, and sitting with me when she got tired. I made sure she ate before the main rush. She chose turkey, macaroni and cheese, green beans, and a dinner roll she tore into tiny pieces while pretending she was not watching the door every time a new family entered. Her mood did not magically improve. She laughed at one of Marlene's jokes, then went quiet when she saw a little girl hug her grandmother. Later, she asked whether the resort's indoor pool was probably open yet. I said it probably was, and let the sadness stay where it belonged. Around early afternoon, the local television crew arrived. Marlene had warned us, so I noticed them before Lucy did. One reporter, a camera operator, and a producer wearing a station jacket and carrying a clipboard. They did not come rushing toward us. They filmed the room first, the kitchen doors swinging, volunteers serving food, people talking over paper plates, children decorating sugar cookies at a side table. The annual meal had been covered before. To everyone who had been there longer than we had, the camera seemed almost routine. Lucy noticed it when the camera operator filmed 2 volunteers carrying a tray past us. "Are we on TV?" she whispered. "Maybe in the background." She immediately smoothed the front of her sweater. I almost laughed. The reporter interviewed Marlene near the entrance, then spoke with a few longtime volunteers. We kept working. At one point, the camera operator filmed the tables being pushed together, and Marlene explained that the room had been rearranged because they had more guests than expected. The reporter looked toward Lucy, who was putting new place cards beside cups. Was the new setup her idea? Marlene did not turn Lucy into something she was not. She asked a good question. The rest of us finally looked at the room differently. That was all. A little later, the reporter approached me while Lucy and I were carrying napkins back from the supply table. She asked whether we were comfortable answering one quick question about why we had volunteered that day. My first instinct was no. I had spent the entire morning protecting Lucy from being turned into a story other people could interpret. I did not want to put her pain on television. I did not want to show the screenshot. I did not want strangers deciding whether my parents were monsters or whether I was overreacting. Most of all, I did not want Lucy standing beside me while I explained the worst thing that had happened to her before breakfast. I said I would answer only if the question stayed about why we were there, not about private family details. The reporter agreed. The camera came up. There was no dramatic countdown. The reporter asked my name, Lucy's first name, and how we had ended up spending Christmas at the meal. I could have said our plans changed. That would have been true, but not enough. I could have said there was a family issue. Also true, and still not enough. For once, I wanted to say exactly what I knew without protecting the people who had created the situation and without turning them into the subject. So I looked at the reporter and said, "We were supposed to be on a family trip today. That plan changed without Lucy, or me choosing it, so I decided she wasn't going to spend Christmas feeling unwanted or alone." That was it. I did not say Myrtle Beach. I did not say grandparents. I did not say alarm. I did not say text. The reporter glanced toward Lucy and asked whether she liked helping with the tables. Lucy looked at the camera, then at the room behind it. "There was room," she said. "We just had to move things." The reporter smiled, and the camera operator lowered the lens. The whole exchange lasted less than 2 minutes. Then someone in the kitchen called for more volunteers at the dessert table, and the day kept moving. National television was the furthest thing from my mind. I learned later that the station edited the meal into a short feature and sent it through the normal affiliate feed. A national desk could use it or ignore it. Neither Lucy nor I knew it had traveled anywhere after the reporter left. What I did know was that my phone had begun to fill with messages from my parents. I did not answer the first few. Mom wanted to know where we were. Dad asked again whether I really planned to throw away the whole trip. Mom wrote that Lucy was going to regret missing Christmas with her cousins. Then she sent the line that made me put my phone back into my coat pocket without responding. "You are teaching her that one disagreement means she gets to walk away from family." One disagreement. I looked across the hall at Lucy, helping stack paper plates. The alarm had been moved 1 hour. They had left before she woke, and Mom had told her the family would have more fun without her. Calling it one disagreement only made the language smaller. I did not reply. Sometime after 4, when the main meal had slowed and volunteers were beginning the long cleanup, my brother texted me, "Where are you?" I almost ignored that too. Then another message arrived. "Mom says you decided to keep Lucy home this morning. She said you told them to go ahead and not wait." I read it twice. The room around me seemed to tilt, not because the statement was complicated, but because it was so clean. That was not what had happened. Before I could answer, Erin sent one more. She also said Lucy wasn't feeling great. What is going on? I looked across the hall. Lucy was seated at a table with a paper cup of hot chocolate, drawing a face on the cardboard sleeve with a pen Marlene had given her. I stepped into the corridor outside the main room and called Aaron. He answered quickly. I could hear resort noise behind him, voices, a television, children somewhere farther away. "Sam? What exactly did Mom tell you?" There was a pause. "That you changed plans this morning, that Lucy wasn't feeling good, and you decided she should stay home. She said you told them to go ahead because you'd probably come later." I closed my eyes. Mom had not only left my daughter behind, she had arrived at the resort with an explanation ready. "Did she tell you she changed Lucy's alarm from 6 to 7? The silence on the other end was immediate. "What?" I almost kept going. I could have told him every fact right then. The clock, the bag, the text, Dad's admission. I could have forced him to choose which version he believed before he had even processed the first contradiction. Instead, I stopped. Part of changing my own behavior had to mean not turning Aaron into a courier between me and my mother. "I'm not doing this through you," I said. "Not today. Sam, she just told everyone you changed your mind." I did not cancel that trip, and Lucy did not choose to stay home. His voice changed slightly. "Then what happened? We'll talk when you're not in the middle of the resort. Are you saying Mom left her? I looked through the doorway at Lucy. I'm saying what I just said. I did not cancel the trip. Lucy did not choose to stay home. Aaron let out a slow breath. I could tell he wanted more, but he did not push hard. Not yet. All right, he said finally. I'll call you later. When I went back into the hall, I did not tell Lucy about the call. Not because I wanted to hide the truth from her, but because I did not yet have a new truth. I had only learned that at least one person at the resort had been given a story in which I had chosen the very thing that had been done to us. Now I knew there was also a version being told after the fact, a version that made me responsible. By early evening, the community center was nearly empty. The last guests left with foil-covered containers. Volunteers folded tables, swept floors, and packed decorations into plastic bins. Lucy helped gather unused place cards, then sat on a chair near the wall, with her coat folded under her head for a pillow. She was exhausted. Marlene came over carrying 2 takeout containers. For later, she said. I thanked her. She glanced toward Lucy. She did good today. She needed somewhere to be. So did half the people who came through that door. Marlene did not turn kindness into rescue. She made room and let people decide what the room meant to them. Before we left, the local producer stopped by and thanked the remaining volunteers. She mentioned that the station had already aired a short version of the piece, and that the network feed had picked up several clips for possible holiday roundups. Marlene laughed. As long as they spelled my name right. Nobody said CNN. Nobody called my parents. Nobody planned a public confrontation. Lucy and I drove home after dark. She lasted about 20 minutes before falling asleep in the passenger seat, her head tilted toward the window, the pink luggage tag still tucked in her coat pocket. I turned the radio low and let the road noise fill the car. My parents called twice during the drive. I did not answer. Aaron sent a single message around 8:30. Can you talk when you get home? I told him yes. At home, I carried the takeout containers into the kitchen and woke Lucy enough to get her inside. She changed into pajamas, brushed her teeth, and curled up at one end of the couch under a blanket instead of going straight to bed. I sat beside her and turned on a Christmas movie neither of us followed. At 8:56, Aaron FaceTimed. I almost declined because Lucy was still awake, but she had already closed her eyes. I lowered the volume on the television and answered. Aaron's face appeared first. He was in the resort suite, or one of the common living areas attached to it. The lighting was warm. Behind him I could see part of a couch, a glass balcony door reflecting the room, and a television mounted on the wall. For a second, the ordinariness hurt. That was where Lucy had been supposed to be. Her cousins' voices drifted from somewhere off-screen. Aaron moved farther from the room. Can you tell me now? I kept my voice low. What did Mom say after I called you? He rubbed a hand over his jaw. She said you were upset and making it sound worse than it was. She said Lucy had been difficult lately, and you decided not to force the trip. My stomach tightened. That's not what happened. I figured that much out. He glanced behind him before looking back at me. Sam, did Mom really change the alarm? Before I could answer, someone in the resort room raised the television volume. Aaron turned his head. I heard the CNN anchor before I could see the screen clearly. It was one of those Christmas night roundup segments. Weather, travel, volunteers, families, community events from around the country. Aaron gave a distracted half-laugh. Hold on, Dad's got CNN blasting. Then the image behind him changed. I recognized the community center before I recognized myself. The garland along the wall, the long tables, Marlene in her green apron. Aaron stopped talking. He turned his phone, so the television filled more of my screen. The local affiliate package was playing on CNN. At 9:03 p.m. on Christmas night, I watched myself appear on national television through my brother's phone. Not a still photograph. Moving video. Lucy was beside me, carrying a stack of red napkins. Then the footage cut to her placing table numbers, while volunteers moved the serving station. Another shot showed the late arriving guests sitting inside the main hall instead of beyond the doorway. On my couch, the real Lucy stirred but did not wake. In the resort room, people had gone quiet. Aaron angled the phone farther. I saw Mom standing near the television. Dad was a few feet away, holding his own phone in one hand. Then the reporter's question played, followed by my voice. We were supposed to be on a family trip today. That plan changed without Lucy or me choosing it, so I decided she wasn't going to spend Christmas feeling unwanted or alone. CNN did not say my parents' names, mention Myrtle Beach, describe the alarm, or show the text. The segment accused Linda Brooks and Robert Brooks of nothing. It did not need to, because everyone in that resort room had just heard me say that the trip changed without Lucy or me choosing it. And according to Mom, I had been the one who chose. I watched Dad's face change. It was not outrage. It was not embarrassment first. It was recognition. The phone slipped out of his hand. It hit the tile floor with a hard crack loud enough for Aaron's microphone to catch it. Dad bent instinctively, but for 1 second he stayed frozen, staring at the television. The image shifted to Lucy's brief line. There was room. We just had to move things. Then the package moved on to another Christmas story. Aaron turned the phone back toward himself. Behind him, the room came alive all at once. I heard Mom say my name. Not kindly. What did she tell them? Someone else asked. I thought Sam canceled. Dad was still looking down at his phone on the floor. Aaron stepped away from the room and into what looked like a hallway. What the hell is going on? I did not answer immediately. He lowered his voice. Mom told us you decided this morning not to come. She said Lucy wasn't feeling well, that you told them to leave and not hold up the trip. I never told them that. I know. You just said it on national television. I said it to a local reporter hours ago. I didn't know CNN was going to use it. His expression sharpened, as if he believed me, but was still trying to understand the shape of the problem. From the room behind him, I heard Mom say, "Louder now. She is doing this to make us look terrible." The sentence reached me clearly through Aaron's phone. I had not named her or described what she did. I had only told the truth about my own choice after hers, and she recognized herself anyway. Aaron looked back toward the room, then at me. What did Mom send Lucy? I hesitated. This was no longer the same question as before. I could not tell him everyone agreed, and then let him assume I was paraphrasing. So I said the sentence exactly. Lucy texted her, "Where's everyone?" Mom replied, "Everyone agreed we'd have more fun without you." Aaron's face went still. What? That's what she sent. He stared at me. Then his eyes shifted toward the resort room. Everyone agreed? Yes. He shook his head once. Not in disbelief at me, in confusion. Sam, nobody asked me. I felt something inside my chest loosen and tighten at the same time. What do you mean? I mean, nobody asked me if Lucy should be left behind. Nobody asked me anything like that. He spoke more quietly now. I thought she was sick. I thought you decided to keep her home. I looked at Lucy asleep beside me, one hand curled under her cheek. The question she had asked me that morning came back with exact force. Did everyone really agree? Since shortly after 7 that morning, the possibility that the answer might be yes had been sitting over both of us. Now, for the first time, there was a crack in it. Aaron had not agreed. That did not tell me what anyone else knew. It did not prove Mom had invented the whole thing. It did not erase Dad's admission that he had agreed to the alarm plan, but the word everyone was no longer solid. Behind Aaron, Mom was still talking. I could not make out all of it, only pieces my name. Christmas. Embarrassing. Misunderstanding. Aaron looked back once more, then moved farther down the hall. "Sam," he said, "I was sitting right here with half the family. Nobody voted on Lucy. Nobody even asked me. I looked at my daughter. She had spent Christmas believing an entire room of people had decided the day would be better without her. For the first time, I understood that the sentence that hurt her most might not have described a decision at all. It might have been something my mother needed her to believe." The next morning, Lucy woke before I did. I found her at the kitchen table in her pajamas, eating dry cereal from a bowl because she had not wanted to wait for milk to warm up from the refrigerator. The television was off. Her Christmas sweater was draped over the back of a chair, and the pink luggage tag she had taken from her overnight bag sat beside her spoon. For a second I stood in the doorway and watched her turn the tag over between two fingers. Then she looked up. "Did Uncle Aaron say yes?" I knew exactly what she meant. "No," I said. Her hand stopped moving. "He didn't agree to leave you behind. He told me nobody asked him." Lucy looked down at the little tag again. "So, Grandma lied?" The answer should have been easy. The evidence was sitting there. Aaron had said no. Mom had told Lucy everyone had agreed. Both things could not be true. But I had learned enough in one day to stop rushing past what I actually knew. "I know she said something that wasn't true," I said. "I still need to understand what everyone else was told." Lucy frowned. "But Uncle Aaron counts as everyone. There are times when a child says something so simple that every adult explanation around it suddenly looks ridiculous." "Yes," I said. "He does." She pushed the cereal around with her spoon. I could see relief in her face, but it was small. One person, not rejecting her, did not erase the image she had carried all Christmas morning of an entire family deciding against her. Still, it changed one thing that mattered. The answer was no longer an impossible wall. There was at least one person on the other side of it. I did not tell her about Mom's cover story yet. I did not want Lucy spending the day comparing adult lies when she had already spent Christmas carrying one. I told her Aaron and I were going to talk again after he got home from Myrtle Beach, and that I would tell her anything that affected her directly. She nodded, then asked if she could open one of her presents. That question was such a relief. I nearly laughed. We had postponed most of our gifts the day before without discussing it. Christmas had simply gone somewhere else. So we sat on the living room floor in our socks while she opened a science kit, 2 books, and a pair of fuzzy slippers with little fox faces on them. She wore the slippers immediately, even though one still had tissue paper stuck inside the toe. For an hour, our house looked ordinary. My phone did not. By mid-morning, I had messages from Mom, Dad, and Aaron. Mom's were the most frequent. She wanted to know why I had announced family business on television. She said people at the resort were confused and upset. She said I had taken a private disagreement and turned it into something public. The strange part was that I had not announced family business. I had not named her. I had not explained the alarm. I had not shown the text. She was angry because the truth I had told about myself made the story she had told about me impossible. Dad's messages were shorter. "Let Christmas go. We can talk when everyone calms down. There is no reason to keep pulling people into this." I read that last one twice. People had already been pulled into it. Lucy had been told they all agreed to reject her. Aaron had been told I voluntarily canceled the trip. The relatives at the resort had been given a reason for our absence before I even knew I needed one. What Dad meant was not stop pulling people in. He meant stop letting them compare what they had been told. Aaron's message was different. "Call me when you can. I want to get the timeline straight." That phrase, "get the timeline straight," was so much more useful than, "Are you okay?" or "What are you going to do?" that I called him after lunch. He and his family were driving back from Myrtle Beach, but his wife was behind the wheel. He moved to the passenger seat, put in one earbud, and told me he could talk without the children hearing. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad in front of me, though I did not write much. I did not want to turn my own family into a case file. I wanted one thing, to put his Christmas morning beside mine and see where they stopped matching. Aaron started with what he knew personally. He and his wife had left home around 6:30. At 6:45, he had texted me Merry Christmas, exactly as I remembered. Mom and Dad were already on the road. Aaron had assumed Lucy was with them because that was the plan. When he reached the resort late that morning, Mom told him we were not coming right away. According to her, I had decided Lucy was not feeling well and would keep her home. She said I had told Mom and Dad not to wait, and that we might come later if Lucy felt better. Did she say she talked to me? I asked. Yes. Did she say when? He paused. No. I looked at the clock on my kitchen wall, even though the timing was already fixed in my head. At 7:00 something, I said. Lucy woke up alone. Aaron did not interrupt. She called me from their house. Her bag was still by the door. The alarm we set for 6 was set to 7. Mom admitted she changed it. She said she changed it so they could leave before Lucy woke. There was a long silence. I continued because the next fact mattered just as much. I asked Dad separately if he knew. He said yes. He agreed. Aaron exhaled slowly. I told him the exact wording Mom had sent Lucy again, not because he needed to hear the cruelty twice, but because this conversation was supposed to replace assumption with fact. Where's everyone? Everyone agreed we'd have more fun without you. Aaron said nothing for several seconds. Then he said, No one asked me. I know, no one asked my wife either. I did not ask him to start calling other relatives. The outline of the truth was already clear enough. A collective decision requires, at minimum, the people being named as part of it to have been consulted. Aaron had been sitting at the center of the resort gathering and had not even known Lucy was intentionally excluded. There had been no family vote. That knowledge landed differently than I expected. I had imagined anger. Instead, I felt something colder. Mom had not merely insulted Lucy in a moment of temper. She had borrowed Aaron's name, his wife's name, the cousins' names, and everyone else's presence to make her sentence heavier. She had made a 9-year-old believe she was outnumbered by people who had never been asked. Aaron must have heard something in my silence. Sam, I'm not defending what she said. But, he sighed. But I also don't think we should jump from Mom. Lied about this too. Mom has been manipulating the entire family for our whole lives. I leaned back in my chair. There it was. Not betrayal. Not yet. Resistance. Part of me had expected Aaron to hear the facts and immediately arrive where I had arrived. That expectation was unfair in its own way. For most of our lives, he and I had experienced Mom differently. Aaron was easier for her because he rarely challenged her and rarely needed her help smoothing over conflict. He had a stable marriage, a predictable job, and a talent for leaving family dinners before the room got complicated. I was the one Mom called when somebody's feelings needed translating. He had benefited from the system without needing to study it. I'm not asking you to call her a monster, I said. I know. I'm asking why she needed Lucy to believe you rejected her. He was quiet. If Mom was just angry, I continued, she could have said, Your grandfather and I decided this. That would still have been awful. But she didn't. She said everyone. Aaron rubbed his forehead. Maybe she meant Dad and her. Then why tell you I canceled the trip? Another pause. That's the part I can't explain, he admitted. I did not press harder. I had spent years believing that if I could just explain something clearly enough, the other person would be forced to understand it. That was another version of control. Aaron had heard the facts. What he did with them had to be his. He asked me what I wanted from Mom and Dad. I realized I did not know. An apology would not answer Lucy's question. Punishing them would not tell me why Mom had spoken for people who had never spoken. I want to know what's true, I said. Aaron gave a tired laugh without humor. That sounds simple. It should be. We talked for another 20 minutes, but not about 10 different relatives. or a list of old grievances. We stayed with the same Christmas morning until there was nowhere left for it to hide. By the time we ended the call, Aaron agreed on 3 facts he had resisted the night before. Mom had told him I chose to keep Lucy home. I had not. Mom had told Lucy everyone agreed to exclude her. Aaron had not. And Mom had already prepared the first story before anyone at the resort knew there was a conflict. Those facts did not prove a lifetime pattern, but they destroyed the idea that Christmas had been one badly worded misunderstanding. Later that afternoon, Lucy was building a small model volcano from her science kit when my phone rang. Mom, I let it ring twice before answering. Not because I wanted a fight, because I wanted to hear what she did when she could no longer assume I would call first. She began with my brother. Aaron is very upset. I looked toward the living room. Lucy was kneeling on the rug, reading the instructions aloud under her breath. What did he say? I asked. Mom hesitated just long enough for me to notice. He doesn't understand why you're dragging him into this. I felt the old mechanism trying to engage. For years, a sentence like that would have worked on me immediately. Aaron is upset. Dad thinks you're being difficult. Everyone feels uncomfortable. I would have called Aaron not to ask what he thought, but to repair what Mom told me he thought. This time, I had spoken to him less than 2 hours earlier. He can tell me that himself, I said. Mom's voice cooled. This is exactly what I mean. You're making everyone pick sides. No. I'm talking directly to my brother. You never used to be this suspicious. There were 10 answers I could have given. I chose none of them. What did Aaron say to you? She ignored the question and returned to Christmas. Lucy had been alone for a short time. Dad and she had known I would be home soon. The text had been written in frustration. CNN had made a private situation look dramatic. None of it needed to become a larger family crisis. It was one coherent defense, and I let her finish it. Then I said, "You told Aaron I chose to keep Lucy home." I explained the situation. That wasn't the situation. You were obviously not bringing her after you got upset. That happened after you left her. Mom went silent. The distinction mattered. Her story only worked if my later decision not to drive to Myrtle Beach could be moved backward in time and used to justify her earlier decision to leave Lucy. I heard her take a breath. You are determined to make this as ugly as possible. No, I'm trying to keep the order of events straight. That is not what Aaron thinks. The sentence was almost perfect. I looked down at my phone. While Mom was still speaking, a text from Aaron appeared. Mom just called me. She says you're accusing her of turning the whole family against Lucy. I told her that's not what you said. A second message followed. She also said you told her I'm furious with her and taking your side. I didn't tell her either of those things. I stared at the screen while Mom continued telling me what Aaron supposedly thought. Something changed in that moment. This was not a memory. It was not my interpretation. It was not a theory about Christmas. The mechanism was happening while I watched. Mom was telling me Aaron was upset that I dragged him in. She was telling Aaron I had claimed he was on my side. Neither statement matched the conversation we had actually had with each other. Mom, I said. What? I'm going to call Aaron. Her answer came fast. Why? I just told you what he said. That sentence did more than anything else had. I ended the call. Then I called my brother. He answered with, "Please tell me she didn't just tell you I'm mad at you." Despite everything, I almost laughed. She did. He was quiet for a moment. What did she tell you? I said. That you don't understand why I'm dragging you into this. I said I don't want to be put in the middle. That's not the same thing. No, and she told me you're trying to make me choose between you and her. I never said that. I know, now. The last word mattered. Now. Not because we suddenly trusted each other more than we trusted our mother. Because for once, we had removed the messenger and compared the actual messages. I could almost feel the old family pattern losing one small piece of ground. Aaron did not turn into my ally in that conversation. He still told me he thought I was moving too fast when I used words like pattern. He still believed Mom might be panicking and saying whatever reduced the immediate conflict. He still wanted the whole thing contained if possible. But he could no longer claim the distortion existed only in my head. "We just caught her doing it," I said. "I know. 2 different stories. I know. To keep us from talking directly." He did not answer that last part immediately. Then he said, "Maybe." For Aaron, maybe was movement. That evening, Dad sent both of us separate messages within 20 minutes of each other. Mine said I needed to stop dissecting every sentence Mom used and let Christmas go. Aaron said nearly the same thing, according to the screenshot he sent me without my asking. Let Christmas go. The wording sounded gentle. It always had. But what it asked us to do was stop comparing. Lucy went to bed early that night. Before she did, she asked whether I had talked to Uncle Aaron again. Yes. Did he change his mind? About what? About me. The question hurt because it showed how children hear adult conflict. To Lucy, if Aaron had not rejected her, then maybe he could still change his mind and join the people who had. He never decided against you, I said. That part I know. She considered that, then nodded and went upstairs. I stayed at the kitchen table after she was asleep. Aaron called again around 9. This time, neither of us had a fresh crisis to report. There was no new lie to expose. We were both simply sitting with what had happened when we stopped letting Mom carry information between us. He said something I had not expected. "Do you remember that thing with your graduation dinner?" I did, vaguely. Several years earlier, I had been late helping Mom set up for a family dinner after a problem at work. She had told me Aaron was furious because everybody had been waiting and that I needed to apologize before I arrived so the evening would not start tense. I had apologized. The memory was ordinary enough that I had almost lost it. Aaron said, "She told me that night that you were upset with me because I hadn't come early to help. She said everyone thought you were doing too much, and I was leaving it all to you." I sat still. I wasn't mad at you. I wasn't mad at you either. We reconstructed only that one event, because one was enough. I remembered arriving at the restaurant already defensive, believing Aaron resented me for being late. He remembered arriving irritated because he believed I had complained that he never helped. We had spent the first hour cold with each other. Mom had moved between us, soothing both sides. At the time, I had thought she was fixing tension. Looking back, I saw a different possibility. She had helped create the tension she was uniquely positioned to fix. Aaron resisted that conclusion immediately. "That doesn't mean she did it on purpose." I didn't say it did. "You were thinking it." "Maybe." He gave a short, frustrated sigh. I understood why he wanted intent to remain uncertain. If Mom had simply exaggerated when stressed, then Christmas was an awful escalation. If she routinely told different people different versions of one another, then the problem was not a single decision. It was the architecture of how we knew our own family. Neither of us was ready to make that leap. "Not yet," Aaron said. "She's always been the one who tells everybody what's going on." "Yes." "She knows who's mad at who." "Yes." "She knows who doesn't want to come to something." I felt the back of my neck tighten. "She tells us who doesn't want to come," I corrected. The line went quiet. That was when a memory surfaced for him. Not a detailed one, just a phrase. "You know," he said slowly, "Mom used to say that about somebody all the time." "About who?" He did not answer immediately. I could hear him thinking through years. Not solving a mystery, but trying to remember a name that had stopped belonging in ordinary family conversation. Then he said, "The one who could never get along with anyone." A woman I had once known well enough to recognize by the sound of her bracelets coming through our front door. A woman whose absence had become so normal that I had stopped remembering it was an absence. Aaron's voice dropped. You know who Mom used to talk about exactly like this? I already knew the name before he said it. Aunt Diane. For a few seconds after Aaron said her name, neither of us spoke. Aunt Diane. It felt strange hearing it attached to a living person, instead of one of those half-finished family stories that had hardened into fact because no one questioned them anymore. I had not seen her in about 18 years. I had not heard her voice in longer than Lucy had been alive. Yet the instant Aaron said her name, I could remember the sound of metal bracelets at her wrist, the way they clicked together when she reached for a cabinet or pushed her hair behind one ear. Memory is unfair like that. It can lose an entire person and keep one small sound. Aaron said, Do you remember what actually happened with her? I remember what Mom said happened. That's not what I asked. I looked toward the darkened hallway. Lucy was asleep upstairs. The house had finally gone still, but the stillness no longer felt restful. No, I said. Not all of it. Neither did he. What we had was not a hidden file or an old letter waiting to be discovered. We had two siblings who had grown up inside the same family and somehow carried slightly different versions of why one woman had vanished from it. We agreed to talk again the next morning, after both of us had slept. I did not sleep much. The name Diane moved through my mind in fragments. She had been my mother's younger sister, loud where Mom was controlled, careless about whether a joke landed too sharply, affectionate without asking permission first. When I was a child, she brought grocery store flowers on ordinary Tuesdays and let me order dessert before dinner when we were out alone. Mom used to call her impulsive. Diane called Mom organized in the tone people use when a compliment is doing extra work. They argued often, but until I was 16, I had never believed one of those arguments could erase someone. The memory that returned most clearly began with a Saturday I had wanted for myself. I was 16 in 2008. I had been accepted into a weekend leadership program, connected to school, nothing prestigious enough to make newspapers, just a 2-day event I had worked hard to qualify for. I remembered a folder on my desk, a new blouse hanging from the closet door, and the nervous excitement of being somewhere no one knew me as Linda Brooks's daughter. Then there had been a family problem. Even now, the exact adult crisis was less vivid than the role I was assigned inside it. Someone needed help with younger relatives for most of Saturday because plans had changed. Mom told me the family needed me. She said the program happened every year and there would be other opportunities. I remember protesting once, weakly, because by then I already knew what happened after a second protest. Mom did not scream. She did not threaten me. She said, "Everyone is rearranging something. You're not the only person being asked to help." So I stayed. For years, I had remembered that weekend as a core, had evidence that I was dependable. I had nearly forgotten Diane was there. Aaron called mid-morning on December 27. Lucy was at the table working on her model volcano, which was now surrounded by paper towels because she had decided the instructions underestimated how much baking soda made an eruption worth watching. I took my coffee into my bedroom and closed the door. Aaron sounded uneasy before we even started. "I remember that weekend," he said. "Which part?" "The school thing. Mom told me you were being dramatic because you had to miss one day." "I missed both." "Right." There was shame in the way he said it, though neither of us had done anything yet except remember. He had been 20 then, commuting to college and working part-time. Old enough to be considered an adult when it was useful, young enough that he still accepted the version of family events handed to him after the fact. He remembered Diane coming to the house late that afternoon. I remembered her arriving while I was making boxed macaroni and cheese for 3 children. She had looked at the kitchen, looked at me, and asked where Mom was. I told her Mom was handling something upstairs. Diane asked why I was not at my school program. I said the family needed me. I could not remember whether she answered immediately. What I did remember was how quickly the air in the house changed after she went upstairs. Mom and Diane argued behind a closed door at first. Then the voices moved into the hallway. Diane said something about me being 16. Mom said something about Diane making judgments about responsibilities she did not understand. Dad told them both to keep it down. My own role in the memory was embarrassing now. I had kept stirring macaroni, as if the sound of the spoon against the pot could make the argument belong to someone else. Later that evening, Diane found me near the back door. "You know you were allowed to want to go, right?" she asked. At 16, I heard criticism in the question. I said it was fine. She studied me for a second. "That isn't the same thing." I had not remembered that sentence in years, maybe because I had not wanted to. Aaron said, "I remember Mom saying Diane accused her of using you." I sat on the edge of my bed. "She did. Mom told me Diane said you were weak because you always did what Mom wanted." That doesn't sound like what Diane said to me. It's what Mom told me. That distinction had become impossible to ignore. I told Aaron the only direct words I remembered from Diane that day. "You know you were allowed to want to go, right?" He was silent. Then he said, "That's different." Yes. We did not turn the memory into proof of anything. We did not know what Diane had said after I left the room. We did not know what Mom had said to her. We knew only what we had personally heard and what had been delivered to us afterward. That was enough to make the old story less stable. The version I had carried for about 18 years went like this. Diane had interfered in family matters, accused Mom of terrible things, created an ugly fight, and finally announced she was done with all of us. Mom said Diane needed space. Later, when birthdays passed and invitations stopped, Mom said Diane had made her choice. Aaron's version had one important difference. He had been told Diane specifically did not want calls. Mom said she asked us not to contact her. He told me. I felt my grip tighten around my coffee mug. She told me something else. What? That we had all decided to stop inviting Diane, because every event became a scene when she came. Aaron did not answer. I could hear traffic through his phone. He was driving alone somewhere, the turn signal clicking faintly. Finally, he said, "She told you that was a family decision?" "Yes. I was never part of that decision." There it was again, not proof, but a contradiction. He had been told Diane rejected us. I had been told we rejected Diane. Both stories created the same result. No one called. I stood and walked to the window. The December sky was flat gray over the neighborhood, the kind of winter morning in North Carolina that looked colder than it actually was. "Did you ever really try to call her?" I asked. Aaron admitted he had not. Not really. Neither had I, and the answer hurt more than I expected. It would have been easy to make ourselves innocent by saying we were young. I had been 16. Aaron had been 20. Mom was our mother. Diane was the adult who disappeared. But 18 years is made of more than 1 year. I had turned 20, 25, 30. I married. I had Lucy. My husband died. Through all of it, I never searched for Diane's number. Never asked anyone besides Mom what happened. Never questioned why the story that Diane wanted. Nothing to do with us always came through the same person. Aaron had done the same. "I liked the quiet after she was gone," I said. He did not answer right away. I continued because saying it out loud felt important. "They fought all the time. When she stopped coming around, there were fewer arguments. I remember being relieved." "Sam, you were a kid." "I was, and then I wasn't," he sighed. "I was 20. That's worse. It's not a contest." "No, but I should have asked. So should I." That was the first time since Christmas I understood that Mom's way of managing people did not require villains and victims to stay in fixed roles. Aaron and I could have been misled and still have helped preserve the result, because the result was convenient. We ended the call without deciding what to do next. Then I did what I should have done years earlier. I tried to find her. There was no magical lost address. Mom did not keep a secret box of correspondence. Diane had simply lived an ordinary life, while we told ourselves she had vanished. I searched her full name online and found several people who might have been her. The surname Carter narrowed it. An old public professional profile listed a Diane Carter in Virginia, working for a regional nonprofit. The photograph attached to it was small, but the woman had the same eyes. I stared at the screen for a long time before doing anything. The profile had no personal number. A public social page connected to the organization had tagged her in a community event 6 months earlier. From there, I found a public account with minimal activity, mostly garden photos, a dog, occasional fundraisers, no family announcements. The last thing I wanted was to invade her life because my family had suddenly become interested in its own history. So I did not call her workplace. I sent one private message. I rewrote it 4 times before I removed almost everything. Aunt Diane, this is Samantha. I know hearing from me may not be welcome. I was told you chose to leave us. I'm beginning to think I never heard your version. You don't owe me a reply. I just wanted to ask directly instead of asking someone else what you would say. I read it once, then I sent it. Diane did not answer that afternoon. She did not answer that evening. By bedtime, I had checked the message often enough that I turned notifications off. The next morning, December 28, there was still nothing. Aaron asked whether I had contacted her. I told him yes. What did she say? Nothing. Do you think she saw it? I don't know. He started to suggest we find another way to reach her, then stopped himself. No, he said. That's exactly what we're not doing. What? Deciding what she should do before she does it. I smiled despite everything. Good catch. Don't sound so surprised. He still was not fully with me about Mom. He continued to say we did not know Diane's side and that old memories could be wrong. But he had begun changing his behavior before his conclusions were complete. That mattered. Diane answered at 2:17 that afternoon. 2 words. Why now? I read them standing in the grocery store beside a display of discounted Christmas candy. I did not move for several seconds. There was no warmth in the message. No accusation either. Just a question with 18 years behind it, because my daughter was told the whole family had agreed they would be happier without her. When I started asking people directly, I learned that wasn't true. Aaron and I realized we may have accepted other family stories without ever asking the people involved. Your name came up. I'm sorry it took this long. I hesitated over the last sentence. Then I sent it. Her reply did not come immediately. That evening, Mom called Aaron. I knew because he texted me afterward. She asked if I've been talking to you about Diane. I stared at the message. I had not told Mom. Neither had Lucy. Aaron called a minute later. I mentioned her name to Dad, he admitted. Yesterday. I asked if he remembered what happened. What did he say? That Diane made her choice. Exactly those words? Pretty much. And then? He asked why I was asking. I told him you and I remembered different things. I closed my eyes. There was no mystery about how Mom had learned. Dad. Within 20 minutes, Mom called me. I answered in the kitchen while Lucy was showering. Her voice was controlled in the way it became when she wanted anger to sound like reason. Aaron says you're digging up Diane now. I contacted her. The silence that followed was different from her earlier silences. Sharper. You did what? I contacted Diane. Why? Because I wanted to hear from her directly. After 18 years? Yes. Mom gave one short laugh with no humor in it. This is exactly what I was afraid you were going to do. I leaned against the counter. What were you afraid I was going to do? Turn one terrible Christmas morning into an excuse to reopen every painful thing this family has survived. I asked. Did Diane choose to stop seeing us? Yes. The answer came too quickly. Did she tell me that? You were a child. I was 16. You were still a child. Did she tell Aaron not to call her? Mom's voice hardened. I am not doing an interrogation with you. I'm asking because you told him she didn't want calls. She didn't. And you told me the family had decided to stop inviting her. That was the situation by the end. The wording shifted without technically admitting anything. I noticed because I had begun listening for who actually made a decision inside sentences. Who decided? Mom exhaled loudly. This is ridiculous. Who decided? Diane made it impossible to have her around. That's not the same answer. There was a pause. Then she said, You have no idea what she was like during that period. Maybe that was true. I'm trying to find out. From her. The disbelief in Mom's voice told me more than the question itself. Yes, I said. From her. She lowered her voice. Samantha, some people rewrite history when they've spent years being angry. Diane was always dramatic. She interfered in things that were not her business, accused people of things, and when the rest of the family stopped indulging it, she walked away. The rest of the family. There it was. Who is the rest of the family? You know exactly what I mean. No. I'm starting to realize I usually don't. That made her angry. Finally, she said, Leave her alone. If she wanted to be part of this family, she had 18 years. I looked toward the hallway to make sure Lucy was not nearby. She also had 18 years in which we never called. That was her choice. You keep saying that, because it's true. Then hearing her version shouldn't threaten anything. Mom went quiet. For the first time, I heard something beneath the anger. Not guilt exactly. Loss of control. She said, You are going to hurt people who had nothing to do with Christmas. I almost asked who. Instead, I said, Then those people can tell me that themselves. I ended the call before it became another circle. Dad called an hour later. He did not raise his voice. He rarely did. Sam, he said, you need to think about what you're doing. I am. Diane has been out of our lives for a long time. I know. Some doors are closed for a reason. The sentence sounded tired and wise until I asked the obvious question. Whose reason? Dad did not answer immediately. Then he said, Your mother and Diane had a difficult relationship. You kids don't know everything that happened. Then tell me. I'm not getting into old fights. Did Diane tell you she wanted nothing to do with Aaron and me? Another pause. I remember her wanting distance. That isn't what I asked. His tone changed slightly. Why are you doing this? Because Lucy had woken alone. Because Mom had used Aaron's name without his knowledge. Because Dad had known about the alarm and still thought the urgent problem was my reaction. Because about 18 years earlier, 2 young people had been told a woman did not want them, and the woman may have been told something equally final in the other direction. But I did not say all of that. I'm asking people what they think, instead of asking you and Mom what they think. Dad sighed. You make that sound simple. It should be. Families aren't that simple. No, I said. But speaking for yourself is. He had no answer. Before we hung up, he repeated one sentence. Some doors are closed for a reason. Later that night, I sent Diane one final message. There's one thing I should explain, and then I'll stop contacting you unless you want me to. Lucy is 9. On Christmas morning, Mom told her, Everyone agreed we'd have more fun without you. Aaron and I learned there was no everyone. He was told I chose to keep Lucy home. I was told everyone agreed she should be left behind. That's why your name matters to me now. I'm not asking you to prove anything. I'm trying to stop accepting other people's versions of what you wanted. I sent it. Then I placed the phone in a drawer. An hour passed, then another. I watched half a movie with Lucy and folded laundry. At 10:30 I checked the drawer and saw a notification. Diane had replied. Her message was longer this time, but only slightly. If Linda told you I chose to leave, ask her what she told me. I sat down. My first instinct was to ask immediately, "What did she tell you?" The words were already typed before I stopped. Diane had given me a direction, not an answer. She wanted me to notice that there had been two sides of a conversation before she supplied hers. So I deleted the question. I wrote instead, "I will, and I won't contact you again unless you want me to." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, returned. Then Diane wrote, "I can talk once. Not tonight. Short call. I'll decide when." I stared at the screen. For the first time in about 18 years, Diane was not a story mom told about someone who had left. She was a person deciding for herself whether to open a door. I typed only, "Okay." A minute later, another message came. "And Samantha?" I waited. "Ask her what she told me." I read the sentence twice. Then I set the phone down and understood that the next conversation might change more than what I believed about Aunt Diane. It might change what I believed about the girl I had been when she disappeared. Diane chose the time herself. Her message came on the morning of January 2, after 4 days, in which I had done exactly what I told her I would do, and left her alone. She wrote that she could talk at 7 that evening, for no more than half an hour. No video call. No Aaron. No one else listening. If I wanted to ask something, I could ask, but she might choose not to answer. I replied, "Okay, thank you." Then I spent the day resisting every instinct I had to prepare for her. For most of my life, preparation had been how I made uncertainty bearable. I made lists, rehearsed difficult conversations in the shower, arranged facts in the order least likely to upset anyone. At work, that skill was useful. At home, it had become a way of trying to control pain before it arrived. By late afternoon, I had opened a notebook twice and closed it twice. I did not need a list of questions. Diane was not an interview. She was a person I had failed to know for about 18 years. Lucy noticed I was distracted while we were putting away Christmas decorations. She was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, wrapping a strand of lights around a piece of cardboard the way I had shown her, although she had decided the correct number of twists was apparently 47. "You keep checking the clock," she said. "I have a phone call later." "With Grandma?" "No." She waited. I had promised myself I would not pull her into the adult part of what was unfolding, but I also did not want mystery to become another family language. "With Aunt Diane." "My aunt." Lucy frowned. "The one Grandma doesn't talk to?" "Yes." "Do you know why?" The question was so close to the one I had been asking myself that I nearly smiled. "I know what I was told. I'm trying to learn what she was told." Lucy seemed satisfied with that distinction in a way most adults would not have been. She went back to the lights. At 7, I took the call in my bedroom with the door closed. I sat on the edge of the bed, not at the kitchen table where I had conducted every other family conversation since Christmas. The room was plain and familiar. Laundry basket beside the dresser, one of Lucy's socks under the chair. My husband's old wooden valet tray still holding 2 cufflinks I had never found a reason to move. I wanted somewhere that reminded me I was not entering a trial. I was entering a relationship I had once allowed to disappear. Diane called at exactly 7. Her voice sounded older than the one I remembered, of course. Mine did too, but there was something underneath it I recognized immediately. A dry steadiness that made me think of those bracelets before I thought of her face. "Hello, Samantha." "Hi." For 1 second, I was 16 again, and aware that I had not called her for years. I started with the part that belonged to me. "I believed you left us," I said. And even if that's what I was told, I went a long time without checking. I don't want to begin by pretending I had no responsibility for that. Diane was silent long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then she said, "No, you don't get to put 18 years on the shoulders of a 16-year-old. Relief rose too quickly, and she cut it off before I could accept it. But you also don't get to erase the years after you were 16. The sentence landed exactly where it needed to. I know. I don't need you to punish yourself, she said. I need you not to make me responsible for making you feel better about it. I closed my eyes. I understand. Do you? I'm trying to. That's more honest. There was no reunion in her voice. No softening because I had finally called. She was not waiting for me to say the right thing so she could step back into the role of beloved aunt. She had built an entire adult life in the space where our family was absent. My sudden need for truth did not create an obligation for her to reopen what she had survived closing. She asked about Lucy, before I asked about 2008. Not in the hungry way. Relatives sometimes ask for details about a child they have never met, but carefully. Was she okay? Did she understand that Aaron had not agreed? Had my parents apologized? I told her Lucy knew Aaron had never voted against her. I said my parents were still calling the alarm change a short lapse in judgment, and the text an angry message that had been taken too seriously. Diane made a small sound that was not quite a laugh. What? I asked. Nothing. You can say it. I'm deciding whether I want to. That answer taught me more about the distance between us than any accusation could have. Finally, she said, Linda has always been very good at making the reaction to something seem more serious than the thing that caused it. I did not ask her for examples. I let the sentence stand. After a moment, Diane asked, Do you remember the school weekend? Yes. Do you remember why I was angry? I remember you thought Mom made me give up too much to fix adult problems. That was part of it. Her version came in pieces, not a polished speech. She remembered arriving at the house and finding me cooking for younger relatives when I was supposed to be away at the leadership program. She remembered asking me why I had stayed, and hearing me repeat the phrase that the family needed me. She remembered recognizing it because she had heard me use versions of it before. According to Diane, the argument upstairs had not started because she objected to one missed weekend. It started because she told Mom she was teaching me that being loved meant being useful. The words made my fingers go cold around the phone. Diane continued. I said you were 16, and already acting like every adult inconvenience had your name on it. Your mother told me I was insulting you by making you sound weak. I said the opposite. I said you were capable enough that everyone kept letting you carry things that were never supposed to be yours. A memory returned. Not as a complete scene, but as a physical sensation. The steam from the macaroni pot against my face, the weight of a toddler leaning against my hip, Diane's voice from upstairs, sharper than Mom's. At the time, I had been embarrassed that anyone was arguing about me. I had wanted them to stop. I had not remembered that one of them had been arguing for my right to leave. I thought you were angry at me, I said. Diane went quiet. Why? Mom told Aaron you said I was weak because I always did what she wanted. I don't know if she told me that exact sentence, but I remember believing you thought I was pathetic. For the first time, Diane sounded genuinely startled. I never thought that. I stared at the carpet. I know that now. No, she said. You know I'm telling you that now. You don't know what I thought every day for 18 years. The correction was precise, and I accepted it. You're right, she breathed out slowly. I was angry because I thought you were being trained into a life where everyone would praise you for being dependable while never noticing the cost. I was angry at Linda. I was angry at Robert for always stepping away when Linda and I fought. I was probably too loud. I probably said things I would say differently now. But I was not angry at you for wanting to go to that program. The mention of Dad tightened something in me, but I did not follow it. His role in 2008 was still a question I did not have the right answer to, and Diane had not called to help me build a case against him. I asked the question that had been waiting since her message. What did Mom tell you? Diane did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice had changed. It was flatter, as if she had moved from remembering an argument to remembering what came after it. She told me everybody was exhausted. I said nothing. She said I kept interfering in problems that weren't mine. She said people were tired of being judged by me. She said every time I came around there was tension afterward because I couldn't let things go. The phrases were painfully familiar, even when the details were not. Then Diane said, "And she told me the family would be healthier without me for a while." I stopped breathing normally, not because the sentence was identical to what Lucy had received. It was not. It was worse in another way. The structure was the same. Everyone was tired. People were exhausted. The family would be healthier without you. A group had been placed on one side of a judgment without anyone in that group speaking. "What did you think she meant by the family?" I asked. "All of you." "Aaron?" "Yes." "Me?" "Yes." "Dad?" "Yes." Her answer came without hesitation, because she was not telling me what those people actually believed. She was telling me what she had been made to believe. Diane said Mom told her not to call for a while because everyone needed space. A few weeks later, Diane tried anyway. She called the house once and got no answer. She left a message for Mom. She sent a birthday card to Aaron that year and never heard back. At some point, she mailed me a short note through the family address because she did not have my dorm or later apartment information yet. I had never seen it. Diane did not present these attempts as evidence in a prosecution. She did not know whether the card had been thrown out, misplaced, received and ignored, or simply lost among ordinary life. She did not know who heard which messages. She knew only what happened from her side. Every attempt met silence, delay, or some version of not now. And after a while, she said, "I believed Linda." The sentence hurt more than if she had accused us. "What did you believe?" "That you were relieved. I was gone." I pressed the heel of my hand against my forehead. Across the hall, I could hear Lucy opening a cabinet in the bathroom. Pipes knocked softly when she turned on the faucet. The ordinary sound anchored me in the present. Diane continued before I could apologize again. "I'm not telling you this so you'll say you all loved me secretly. That would be too easy. You were kids. Then you became adults. Maybe there were years you didn't think of me at all. I had years I tried not to think of you either. That's fair. What I'm telling you is that I did not announce I was done with all of you. I thought of Aaron's memory. Mom said Diane was done with all of us. I thought of mine. Mom said the family had decided not to invite Diane anymore. Different endings. Same silence. "Did you tell Mom you wanted distance?" I asked. From her, yes. The answer surprised me. Diane noticed. "That's the part your family story probably kept," she said. "I told Linda I was done arguing with her for a while. I told her I would not keep coming into her house to have the same fight. That is not the same as telling a 16-year-old niece and a 20-year-old nephew I never wanted to hear from them again. The distinction was so simple, it made me angry at all the years we had lived without making it. A person could want distance from one relationship without surrendering every relationship connected to it. Mom had converted one boundary into a collective disappearance. And then she had told each side the other side wanted it. I stood from the bed because I could no longer sit still, but I did not pace. I went to the window and looked at my own reflection against the dark glass. "I need to tell you something," I said. "What?" "For years I thought the quiet after you left proved Mom was right. Diane did not rescue me from the admission. I remember feeling relieved," I continued. "There were fewer fights. I didn't have to wonder if you and Mom were going to start something at dinner. I thought peace meant the problem was gone." Diane's reply was quiet. "Peace for who?" The question went through me. At 16, peace had meant no adults arguing over whether too much was being asked of me. It had not meant less was asked of me. In fact, after Diane disappeared, there had been one fewer person willing to question it. I had remembered the quiet as relief, because I had been trained to value quiet above almost everything, Diane said. "That's why I was so angry that weekend, not because you helped. Families help each other." because no one seemed to notice you were becoming the person who made everybody else's life easier, and then they called that proof you were mature. I leaned my forehead against the cool window. You said love meant usefulness. Yes, I had spent the last 11 days discovering the adult version of that sentence. If I could make Christmas easier, if I could stop Aaron from being uncomfortable, if I could tell Lucy not to take the message personally, if I could let Mom rename the event, then I could still be useful enough to keep the family calm. Diane had named the bargain before I had language for it. I asked one question I had been afraid to ask. Why didn't you try harder to reach me? There was no accusation in my tone, but I heard how young the question sounded after I asked it. Diane took a long breath. Because I believed you didn't want me. The answer was almost unbearable in its simplicity. I was told everyone thought the family was healthier without me, she said. Then I reached out a few times and got silence. At some point, continuing stops feeling brave and starts feeling like forcing yourself on people who have asked you to leave. Lucy had needed only one Christmas morning to believe an entire family had chosen a happier day without her. Diane had lived inside a version of that sentence for about 18 years. The comparison did not make the situations identical. Lucy was a child deliberately left alone. Diane had been an adult in a real conflict and had chosen distance from Mom. But the mechanism beneath both events was suddenly impossible to miss. One person had taken individual relationships and spoken over them with a collective voice. I sat back down. I'm sorry, I said. Diane was quiet. I know that doesn't fix anything. No, I'm not asking it to. Good. Another silence settled between us, different now. Not comfortable, but honest. I asked whether she wanted to speak with Aaron. Her answer came immediately. No. I had expected hesitation and got a boundary instead. Okay. He may deserve his own conversation someday. That doesn't mean I owe him one tonight because you finally found me. I understand. And I don't want you calling him after this and giving him my version like a report. The instruction caught me exactly where my instincts lived. I had already imagined calling Aaron. Not to weaponize Diane, I would have told myself, just to clarify, just to save him uncertainty, just to make sure he understood what I now understood. In other words, to become the person carrying everyone's meanings again. I won't, I said. Diane sounded skeptical. You sure? No, I admitted, but I won't. That made her laugh for the first time. It was brief and it did not restore anything, but I recognized the sound. Our 30-minute call became 38. Not because Diane told me everything. She did not. We did not review 18 lost Christmases or trace every unanswered attempt. She did not ask about my marriage, my husband's death, or why no one had told her when he died. Those absences remained where they were, too large to solve in one evening. Before we hung up, she said, "Don't make me the proof that Linda is bad." I won't. I mean it, Samantha. I had problems with your mother. I said cruel things too. I left her alone after that fight because I wanted to. If you turn me into the good sister and her into the evil one, you'll just build another family story nobody is allowed to complicate. I swallowed. All right. What happened to Lucy was wrong. What happened with me was different. But yes, the part about everyone sounds familiar. That was all she was willing to give the comparison. It was enough. When the call ended, I stayed sitting on the bed with the phone in my hand. I did not call Aaron. I did not text Mom. I did not write down every sentence before memory could blur it. I went downstairs and found Lucy at the kitchen table making toast. She looked at me. Was that your aunt? Yes. Was she mad? The question was 9 years old. She has reasons to be careful with us. Lucy considered that. Are you going to see her? I don't know. Does she want to? I don't know that either. Lucy nodded, as if uncertainty was allowed to exist. That was new in our house. The next morning, Aaron texted asking whether Diane had called. I answered only, yes. We spoke. He called almost immediately. I let it ring once, then answered. What did she say? I looked at the phone and heard Diane's warning as clearly as if she were still on the line. She told me her story is hers. Aaron went quiet. I can tell you what changed for me, I said. I can't tell you everything she told me. He did not like that. I could hear it in the pause, but after a moment he said, okay. So I gave him only my part. I told him I no longer believed Diane had simply announced she wanted nothing to do with us. I told him there had been a real conflict with Mom, and Diane had wanted distance from Mom. I told him the idea that she had rejected every one of us was no longer something I was willing to repeat as fact. Aaron asked if Diane would talk to him. Not right now. Did she say why? Yes. Another pause. You're not going to tell me? No. He exhaled, frustrated. Then he surprised me. All right. It was the first time either of us had possessed information about another family member and refused to turn it into a shared possession simply because we were related. Later that day, Mom texted me. Can we talk without turning this into another family event? I did not answer immediately. A second message came 20 minutes later. Your father and I want to meet with you. Just us. No Aaron, no Diane. We need to put Christmas behind us before Lucy gets more upset by all of this. The wording made my stomach tighten. Lucy was not becoming more upset because adults were telling the truth. She was beginning to sleep through the night again. She had stopped asking whether her cousins hated her. She was still hurt, but the hurt had become specific instead of limitless. Mom did not know that because she had not asked Lucy. Another message arrived. We can talk about the alarm. I can apologize for the text, but dragging Diane into this is hurting people who had nothing to do with what happened on Christmas. For the first time since the holiday, Mom was offering something that sounded like movement, an apology, a conversation, an acknowledgement that the alarm and the text could be discussed. 6 months earlier, I would have accepted before she could withdraw it, translated a partial apology into something larger, and told myself repair had begun. Now the condition was visible. Christmas could be discussed only if Diane was separated from it. The alarm could be admitted only if the older pattern remained untouched. Lucy's hurt could be addressed only if the adults who had received different stories stopped comparing them. Mom was no longer asking me to believe her version. She was asking me to help contain everyone else's. I did not reply until evening. Where do you want to meet? Her answer came quickly. She suggested a quiet restaurant near my parents' neighborhood, just the three of us. Then one final message appeared. We can still fix this before it goes any further. I read the sentence several times. For most of my life, fix had meant reducing conflict until everyone could sit in the same room again. After talking to Diane, I understood there was another possibility. Sometimes fix meant making the truth small enough that the old arrangement could survive it. The restaurant Mom chose sat 10 minutes from my parents' house. Neutral, mostly because none of us had memories there. We met on a weekday just after noon while Lucy was at school. I had rearranged my break at the hospital and told my parents I had 45 minutes. Mom and Dad had chosen a booth near the back, far enough from the lunch crowd that voices would not carry easily. She had said she wanted a conversation. She had also chosen a room where she expected the conversation to stay contained. Mom looked tired in the way people look when something they usually manage has stopped responding to management. Dad looked older than he had at Christmas. The cracked corner of his phone screen was still visible when he set it down. Seeing it pulled me briefly back to 9:03 on Christmas night. I let the memory pass. Mom began without ordering food. I don't want this to become another fight. Neither did I. That was one of the problems. For years, the fact that none of us wanted a fight had been enough to decide who had to give something up. I'm listening, I said. Mom folded her hands on the table. She had prepared herself. I could tell because she did not jump between topics the way she had on the phone after CNN. This time she moved carefully, incident by incident. Christmas morning first. She said Lucy had been alone for less than 2 hours, that they knew my shift was almost over, and that they had never believed she was in physical danger. Changing the alarm, she said, had been a bad judgment call, made after several weeks of Lucy questioning her and arguing about family plans. She used the word discipline once, then softened it to consequence. She needed to understand that every decision doesn't revolve around what she wants. I kept my hands in my lap. She was asleep. Mom's mouth tightened. That's not the point. It is part of the point. Dad shifted beside her, but he did not speak yet. Mom continued. The text had been wrong, she admitted. She had been angry. She should not have used the phrase she used. She was willing to apologize to Lucy for how the message sounded. Not for telling a 9-year-old the family would have more fun without her. For how it sounded. I heard the difference and did not correct it immediately. Then she moved to Diane. That was where her voice changed, from regretful to defensive. Diane, she said, had always been difficult. The 2008 argument had been real. Diane had accused Mom of things Mom still believed were unfair. Diane had wanted distance after the fight. Mom insisted I was taking a complicated adult estrangement and reducing it to one sentence because the sentence resembled what she had said to Lucy. You are connecting things because you're upset, she said. And because you're protective of Lucy, which I understand. But that doesn't make every old family disagreement part of the same story. Diane herself had warned me not to make the situations identical. The trouble was that Mom was using the differences to erase the one similarity that mattered. You told Diane the family would be healthier without her, I said. Mom's eyes sharpened. I had not quoted Diane's whole call. I was not going to, but that fact had become part of what I believed, and I was allowed to speak about what it changed for me. She told you that? I'm not giving you a report of her conversation. Mom leaned back. So she gets to make accusations, and I'm not allowed to know what she said? That's not what I said. This is exactly the problem, Samantha. You are letting somebody who has been angry for 18 years come back and rewrite our family because you're furious about Christmas. Dad finally spoke. Sam, slow down. His tone was soft. It always had been. I looked at him. I am sitting still. He rubbed one thumb along the condensation on his glass. Mom exhaled and looked away, as if she were the one trying not to be provoked. I recognized the choreography. Dad would lower the temperature. Mom would allow herself to sound wounded. I would become the loudest emotional risk in the booth even if I never raised my voice. So I did not chase any of it. I asked one question. What are you asking me to do? The answer came more slowly. Mom looked at Dad first. He gave the smallest nod. Then she said, I am asking you to stop turning this into something it is not. That still doesn't tell me what you want me to do. Her jaw tightened. She wanted me to tell Aaron and the others that Christmas had been a family misunderstanding that got out of hand. Stop discussing Diane's estrangement as connected to Christmas. Let her apologize to Lucy privately, without conditions, or an audience, and then return Lucy's relationship with her grandparents to normal. Separately, each request sounded like repair. Together, they formed a contract. I could have an apology and my parents back if I accepted a smaller version of what happened, and Lucy could have her grandparents back if she behaved as though trust had not changed. Mom reached across the table, stopping her hand before it touched mine. We can survive one awful morning, she said. Families survive worse things than this every day. I looked at her hand. The word survive bothered me. Lucy had not created something the family needed to survive. Mom and Dad had made a decision. Now they wanted the rest of us to survive, knowing about it quietly. I asked, What happens if I don't tell everyone it was a misunderstanding? Mom's expression changed. Not dramatically. She simply became still. Mom's answer defined the choice for me. If I accepted her terms, I was healing. If I refused, I was choosing conflict. That was the old bargain, in a cleaner sentence. Dad finally turned fully toward me. Your mother is trying. I looked at him. He continued before I could answer. You know she doesn't apologize easily. That was true. He knew I knew it. He also knew exactly how much value I had always placed on partial movement from Mom, because partial movement was often the most we got. You don't have to solve 18 years today, he said. You don't have to solve Diane. You don't have to solve every conversation anybody ever had. Lucy is safe. You're safe. We are all still here. The last sentence hit harder than the others. We are all still here. 3 years earlier, that would have ended the discussion. Maybe even 3 weeks earlier. After my husband died, we are all still here had become one of the central facts of my life. My parents had stood beside me in a funeral home, while I signed forms I could barely read. Dad had driven my car home, because I could not remember where I parked it. Mom had stayed in my kitchen the first night after the funeral, and washed dishes that were already clean, because neither of us knew what else to do. They had helped me. They had loved me. Both things were true. Dad knew exactly which memory he was touching. Family was what held you up, he said quietly. You know that. When everything fell apart, we were here. Aaron was here. You needed us, Sam. I felt my throat tighten. He was not wrong. That was why the argument hurt. If he had been inventing history, I could have rejected it easily. But my parents had not been villains every day of my life. They had carried me through the worst season I had ever known. That history was part of why I had trusted them with Lucy on Christmas morning. Dad looked down at the table. If you keep pushing this, he said, I don't know what family is going to be left when you're done. For a few seconds I could not answer. Dad had reached the fear beneath all my fixing, that if I insisted on truth, one day everybody would go home. I remembered the months after my husband died, when my parents' house had been the nearest thing to structure, then Lucy waking alone in that same house, and Diane living about 18 years as if everyone had signed the sentence that the family was healthier without her. Dad asked, Is this worth losing your family over? Before Christmas, I would have answered the wrong question. I would have started calculating what I could concede. Instead, I asked, Why does telling the truth mean I'm the one losing the family? Neither of them answered. I looked at Mom. The alarm was not an accident. She opened her mouth. I did not let the conversation reopen. I'm not asking you to agree with my interpretation. You admitted changing it. Dad admitted knowing. I am not going to tell anybody it was a misunderstanding. Mom's lips pressed together. I continued. I am not going to ask Lucy to pretend the text hurt because she misunderstood your wording. I said I would apologize. You said you would apologize for how it sounded. Her eyes flashed. I kept my voice even. And I am not going to tell Diane she cannot speak to Aaron or anybody else because it makes Christmas easier for us. Mom leaned back sharply. So this is about Diane now? No. Diane is about Diane. That stopped her for half a second. I had not planned the sentence. It was simply true. Lucy is about Lucy. Aaron is about Aaron. What happened between you and Diane belongs to you and Diane. I'm done treating all of those relationships like one problem that has to be solved by one person. Mom stared at me. Dad said my name softly. I shook my head. I am not asking either of you to confess to some 20-year plan. I don't think there was one. I'm not asking Mom to say every disagreement in our family was manipulation. I'm not asking Dad to decide today what he remembers from 2008. I was not making peace conditional on them giving me the exact story I wanted. I was removing my cooperation from the story they wanted me to repeat. If people ask me what happened at Christmas, I will tell them what I know happened. If Diane wants to talk about her own life, I will not stop her. And Lucy is not going back to normal because you want normal back. Mom's face had gone pale with anger. So what exactly are you punishing us with? I haven't decided every boundary yet. You already have. You're keeping our granddaughter from us. I am protecting her while I decide what trust looks like now. From us? The disbelief in her voice almost pulled me into another argument. Almost. Yes. The words sat between us. Dad looked away first. Mom picked up her purse. You have made your choice. The phrase was familiar enough to make my skin go cold. Diane made her choice. I had made my choice. Soon, if Lucy resisted hard enough, maybe she would make hers too. I did not tell Mom that. I simply said, I have. She slid out of the booth. Dad stayed seated for another moment. He looked exhausted. Sam, he said, once families break, they don't always go back together. I thought of Diane. I know. Then I stood and left. I returned to work with 20 minutes left in my rearranged break and spent the afternoon doing ordinary things. The normality helped. For the first time since Christmas, I had not won an argument. I had ended a negotiation. Mom could still believe I was overreacting. Dad could still believe I was risking too much. And I could still wake at 3 a.m. wondering whether they were right. But there was no longer a version of reconciliation in which I would call deliberate behavior accidental just to make the family easier to assemble. That route had closed. When I picked Lucy up that afternoon, she climbed into the car, carrying a paper snowflake she had made at school, even though Christmas was over. Grandma called the school? She asked. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. No, why? She didn't, I was asking. I relaxed. Lucy buckled her seatbelt. Did you talk to her? Yes. Did she say sorry? Not yet, I thought. Then I corrected myself. That was not the most important answer. She said she wants to apologize to you. Lucy considered that. Is she going to say she shouldn't have left me? I don't know what she's going to say yet. Then how does she know she's sorry? I looked over at her. There was no trap in the question. She was 9. I think that's something she still has to figure out, I said. Lucy nodded and began folding the paper snowflakes smaller and smaller in her lap. I did not tell her about the bargain or Dad's warning. Those were adult pressures, not truths she needed to carry. 2 days later, Diane texted me. I had not contacted her since our call. Her message was brief. If Aaron still wants to talk, I'm willing to have one conversation. I read it 3 times before answering. Are you sure? Her response came back almost immediately. No, but I'm willing. The wording made me smile despite myself. Then another message arrived. I do not want you on the call. I sat at my kitchen table, phone in hand. That should have been easy to accept. It was not. My brain immediately began preparing. Aaron would need to know not to start with blame. Diane would need to know Aaron had been 20, not 30. He should probably tell her he had believed she wanted no contact. She should know he had defended Mom after Christmas because he had not understood the pattern yet. Maybe I should send each of them one message, so no one walked into the conversation carrying the wrong expectation. I could see the whole arrangement forming in my head, a carefully balanced bridge with me standing in the middle. I put the phone down. That bridge was the old job wearing new clothes. I wrote to Diane instead. I won't be on it. Do you want me to give him your number? Yes. Tell him only that I said he may call. Nothing else. I waited before answering. Okay. Then I texted Aaron. Diane says she is willing to talk to you once. She gave me permission to send you her number. She asked me not to manage the conversation, so I'm not going to prepare either of you. Do you want the number? His reply took less than a minute. Yes, I sent it. That was all. No summary, no suggested opening line, no warnings in either direction. I put my phone on the counter and walked away before I could send one more helpful message. For the next hour, my brother and my aunt were deciding what relationship they could have without Mom or me translating it. I made dinner, helped Lucy check math homework, and let the world continue without me supervising the call. It was uncomfortable, but necessary. At 8:14 that night, Aaron called me. I answered from the kitchen after Lucy went upstairs to brush her teeth. His voice sounded different. Not angry. Stripped down. "You talked?" "Yes." I waited. My old instinct was to ask what she said, how long the call lasted, whether Diane cried, whether he apologized, whether they talked about Mom. I asked none of it. Aaron noticed. "She told you not to ask." "Huh?" "No, she told me not to manage it." He let out a breath that almost became a laugh. "That sounds like her. You remember her better now?" "No." The answer came quickly. Then he corrected himself. "Maybe I remember how I felt around her." I stayed quiet. He said they had spoken for almost an hour. He was not going to give me a transcript, and I told him I did not want one. That surprised him. "Since when?" "Since approximately 2 weeks ago." That got a real, tired laugh. Then silence. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "I'm only going to tell you one thing because it changes something for me. All right. She never stopped wanting us." I closed my eyes. The sentence was not new to me in meaning. Diane had already told me she never announced she was done with Aaron and me. But hearing it from Aaron mattered because I had not carried it to him. He had heard it from her directly. "She said that?" "Yes." His breath shook. "I spent 18 years thinking she decided we weren't worth the trouble." I leaned against the counter. "I thought she decided that too." "I know." He did not ask me to make him feel better. I did not try. After a moment, he said, "I don't know what to do with this yet." "You don't have to do anything tonight." I called Mom after. My eyes opened. "You did?" I didn't tell her what Diane said. I told her I talked to Diane. I waited. Aaron gave a humorless laugh. She lost it. Mom had demanded to know why he had contacted Diane without talking to her first. Aaron said Diane was his aunt, and he did not need permission. Mom accused us of reopening old wounds and dividing the family. Aaron had not argued all the points. He told her only that he would no longer accept information about Diane from someone other than Diane when Diane was available to speak for herself. That sentence ended the call. For the first time, my brother had drawn a boundary I had not designed for him. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Terrible." I almost smiled. "Same?" "No, I mean really terrible." "I know," he breathed out. "But also like I've been standing in the wrong room for 18 years. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed against my palm. A message from Mom. I did not open it yet. Aaron said, "She's probably texting you." "She is." "I'm sorry." "Why? For calling her?" "No." That was the old logic again. Somebody behaved badly in response to truth, and the person who told the truth apologized for causing the response. Don't apologize for calling your aunt. Aaron was quiet. Then he said, "Okay." I opened Mom's message after we hung up. "This has gone far enough. We are not going to keep having separate conversations and letting everyone create their own version of this family." I stared at the screen. Separate conversations had become dangerous to her because they removed her from the middle. Another message appeared. "We need to sit down as a family and end this." I did not answer. A few minutes later, Aaron texted me a screenshot. Mom had sent him something similar. Then, beneath the screenshot, he wrote, "She wants a family meeting." I typed back, "Of course she does." Aaron called once more. "I think she believes if everybody is in one room, she can get this back under control." I looked toward the staircase. Lucy was humming to herself while she got ready for bed. Maybe, I said. Are you going? I thought about the restaurant, about Dad telling me there might be no family left, about Mom saying I had made my choice, about sending Aaron a phone number and then walking away from the call. Yes, I said, but not to make everybody agree. Aaron was quiet. That may be the first useful rule we've had. The next morning, he forwarded the message Mom had sent to the wider family thread she still used for holiday logistics. Everyone needs to meet. We are ending this before it destroys the family. I read it once, then again. Not because I was afraid of the meeting, because I recognized the word. Everyone. The word sat on my screen long after I had locked my phone. Everyone. For years that word had sounded efficient in my family. Everyone wants dinner earlier. Everyone thinks you should call. Everyone agrees it would be better if you let this go. It saved time because no one had to ask who had actually said what. By the week after New Year's, efficiency was the last thing I trusted about it. Aaron called before I left for work the next morning. He had already replied to Mom's family message, but instead of arguing about whether a meeting was necessary, he had asked one question: who exactly needed to be there? Mom answered with another version of everyone. Aaron told me he was done trying to organize anything through a thread where one person could summarize the rest of us. I'm making a separate group for meeting logistics, he said. Not for fighting, not for reviewing Christmas. Just date, place, and who is actually attending. I was standing at my kitchen counter packing Lucy's lunch. A clementine rolled toward the edge, and I caught it with my wrist while holding the phone against my shoulder. That sounds like a recipe for 6 people arguing and writing. It might be, he said. But at least we'll know who typed their own sentence. That stopped me. Aaron had never been the family organizer. He was usually the person who arrived when Mom told him to arrive, and left when his children got restless. Now he was designing a system because the old one had stopped being trustworthy. He added me first, then Mom and Dad. Diane was not included. Aaron said he would ask her directly whether she wanted to be part of logistics before adding her. He would not assume that agreeing to one phone call with him meant agreeing to re-enter a family group chat. A few minutes later, his first message appeared. For this thread, if someone isn't here, please don't tell the rest of us what that person thinks, wants, remembers, or plans to do. Ask them directly or leave it out. Mom responded almost immediately. This is becoming unnecessarily formal. Aaron did not defend the rule. He simply wrote, "It applies to me too." I read that line twice before slipping my phone into my purse. The difference was small enough to look ridiculous from the outside. No one had reconciled. Mom had not apologized. Dad had not admitted anything new. Diane was still living in Virginia, with a life none of us fully knew. But something practical had changed. My mother was no longer the automatic switchboard through which every family relationship passed. At work that morning, I watched the thread collect ordinary information. Aaron suggested Saturday afternoon. Dad said he could make Saturday. I said I could arrange it if the time was after 1. Mom proposed their house because it was the simplest place for everyone. No one responded to that immediately. That silence would once have become consent. Instead, Aaron wrote, "Let's decide the location after we know who is attending." Around lunch, he messaged me privately that Diane had agreed to be added to the logistics thread for one reason only. She wanted to see what was being said in her name. She had not agreed to attend the meeting. I felt a strange tension in my chest when her name appeared among ours a few minutes later. For about 18 years, Diane had existed in family conversations, only as an absence. Now there was a small circular profile photo beside her name, and the word Diane underneath it. She did not greet anyone. She wrote, "I'm here for logistics. I have not decided whether I'm coming." Mom did not reply for nearly an hour. Then, during my afternoon break, she texted me privately. "This is exactly what I meant. Aaron has pressured Diane into a family confrontation she clearly does not want. You need to tell him to stop before she gets hurt all over again. I looked at the message and felt no urge to call Aaron. That was new too. I was still deciding whether to answer when another message came, this time from him. Mom just told me Diane is insisting on attending and expects all of us to sit there while she settles old scores. Did she tell you anything like that? For a second I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the old system had become visible enough to look mechanical. 2 weeks earlier, Mom could have told me Aaron was forcing Diane, and told Aaron that Diane was forcing the meeting, and both of us might have adjusted ourselves around a conflict that did not exist. I might have called Aaron to make him back off. He might have called Diane already defensive. Mom could then have stepped in to calm the tension she had predicted. This time Aaron did not ask me what Diane wanted. He went to the shared thread. Diane, Mom has told Sam you're being pressured to attend, and told me you're insisting on attending. I don't want either of us speaking for you. Are either of those things true? The answer came 11 minutes later. No. A second message followed. Aaron asked whether I wanted to be added here. I said yes. I have not agreed to attend. No one is forcing me, and I have not demanded anything from anyone. Mom responded with a long paragraph about how everyone was misunderstanding her wording. Aaron answered once. Okay. Then we have Diane's answer. That was the end of it. There was no confrontation, no screenshot exchange, no demand that Mom admit she had said two incompatible things. She had done that before, and we already knew she could. The important change was that the tactic no longer produced the result it was designed to produce. No one moved based on her description of someone else. We asked the person. By evening, Mom had stopped trying to define Diane's intentions in the thread. She moved to the location instead. Her house, she wrote, made the most sense. There was room. No one would have to pay for anything. She could make coffee and put out food so the conversation did not feel hostile. I understood why the offer appealed to her because it appealed to part of me too. I could picture the dining room table, the familiar blue serving bowl, Dad's chair at the end, the sideboard where Mom always stacked napkins before company arrived. Familiar rooms promise familiar behavior. We all knew how to act in that house. That was exactly the problem. At Mom's table, she would become host before anyone spoke. She would decide when coffee was poured, where people sat, when someone had been talking too long, when food needed clearing, when the meeting was over because the room had become unpleasant. None of those things would be sinister on their own. Together they would restore a hierarchy everyone knew by muscle memory. Aaron must have been thinking something similar. I don't think Mom and Dad's house is neutral enough for this, he wrote. If the point is that each person speaks for themselves, no one should own the room. Mom called him ridiculous. Not in the thread. She told me later that she had called him and used that word. He did not relay the rest of their conversation. He only posted that he had found a reservable community room in Raleigh for Saturday afternoon. It had a rectangular table, enough chairs, and a 2-hour block available. No one would be serving lunch. No one would be hosting. I stared at the address when he sent it. It was not Marlene's community center. I was grateful for that. I did not want the place Lucy and I had gone on Christmas turned into family territory. This was a plain municipal meeting room in a building used for neighborhood associations, tutoring sessions, and small workshops. Fluorescent lights, stackable chairs, a whiteboard no one needed. Mom objected that it was cold and impersonal. She said family problems should not be handled like a business meeting, and she offered again to make soup at her house so nobody would arrive hungry or leave feeling unwelcome. The offer sounded generous because hospitality was one of the ways Mom understood authority. If she fed you, she could tell herself she had cared for you, even while deciding the terms of the conversation. Aaron did not argue about the food. He wrote, "Good. Cold and impersonal is fine. Then none of us has home fievlian." He added that the room would be unlocked 15 minutes before the reservation and that there would be no seating plan. People could arrive, sit where they wanted, and leave when they chose. I felt a flicker of anxiety reading that. Structure had always calmed me. The idea of walking into a room without knowing where everyone would sit or who would speak first felt almost reckless. Then I understood why it mattered. We were not replacing Mom as organizer with Aaron or me. We were removing the need for one family interpreter to choreograph everybody else. Dad finally entered the conversation. Saturday at 2 works for me. I could almost feel Mom's anger through the phone, though she did not write again for the rest of the evening. The next day, Dad called me alone. I was leaving the hospital, walking toward the employee lot, with my coat unzipped, because the afternoon had warmed. His name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. Then I answered. He did not mention the community room first. He asked me to keep Diane away. Sam, I'm asking you as your father. Don't bring her into that room. I'm not bringing her anywhere. You know what I mean. I do. That's why I'm correcting it. He exhaled slowly. Traffic moved beyond the edge of the parking lot, tires hissing over damp pavement. Your mother and Diane have 18 years of anger between them. This meeting is supposed to be about fixing what happened with Lucy. Diane hasn't even said she's coming. That's not the point. I almost smiled at the phrase. It had done a lot of work in our family. What are you afraid will happen if she comes? Dad was quiet. I waited. He tried several answers without fully choosing one. Old accusations would get repeated. Mom would become defensive. Aaron was already upset. Diane might say things that could not be taken back. None of it answered the question I had been carrying since Diane's call. Finally, I said, Did you know the stories didn't match in 2008? The line went silent. I stopped walking. A couple in scrubs passed me toward the far row of cars. I moved beside a concrete pillar near the covered walkway. Dad? He lowered his voice. What stories? The one Mom told us, and the one Diane was living with. He said my name in the warning tone he used when he wanted a question to become unreasonable. I did not help him. After a long pause, he said, I knew your mother was telling you kids that Diane wanted space. That's not new. I know. And? Another pause. I also knew Diane felt like the family had pushed her out. The parking lot seemed to flatten around me. He rushed to qualify it. He did not know every conversation. He did not know exactly what Linda had said to Diane after their fight. He did not read letters or hide phone messages. Diane had said she was done fighting with Linda, and Linda had said Diane wanted distance. Everyone was angry. He believed time would cool things down. I listened until he ran out of ways to make uncertainty sound like innocence. Then I asked, If you knew the stories didn't match, why didn't you ask which one was true? Dad said nothing. I could hear his breathing. Why didn't you ask? I repeated. Because it wasn't that simple. It was a question. You were 16. Aaron was 20. Your mother was furious. Diane was furious. Every conversation became a fight. That explains why asking would have been unpleasant. Sam, it doesn't answer why you didn't ask. His voice sharpened for the first time. What exactly do you want me to say? That I should have handled everything differently 18 years ago? Fine. Maybe I should have. I thought they both needed time. I leaned against the pillar. Did you ever ask Diane if she wanted distance from Aaron and me? No. Did you ever ask Mom whether Diane had actually said that? He did not answer. That was an answer in its own way. But I did not turn it into more than it was. Dad had not confessed to planning Diane's disappearance. He had not told me he knew every lie. What he had admitted was narrower, and in some ways, harder for me to dismiss. He saw two versions that could not both be accurate, and chose not to find out why. When I asked what he remembered directly, he gave me one more piece, careful and reluctant. Sometime after the original fight, Diane had told him she felt as if Linda had made the whole family close ranks around her. Dad remembered telling Diane that people were tired and that she should give everyone time. Meanwhile, at home, he heard Mom tell Aaron and me that Diane wanted to be left alone. Did that not sound different to you? I asked. It sounded like two angry sisters describing the same fight differently. One version said she wanted us gone. The other said she thought we wanted her gone. He was silent. Those were not different descriptions of the same desire. They pointed in opposite directions. Dad had noticed enough to remember both, and had still treated the contradiction like weather that would pass if he stayed indoors. I thought if I stayed out of it, they would settle it, he said finally. They didn't. I know that now. You knew they hadn't settled it when a year passed. He became quiet again. I thought of birthdays, Thanksgivings, my wedding, Lucy's birth, my husband's funeral. 18 years contained too many opportunities to keep calling the original silence temporary. Dad said, "I'm not proud of everything." It was the closest he had come to saying anything like regret about Diane. I did not reward it by making it larger. Then say what you actually know on Saturday. His answer was immediate. I'm not promising some public confession. I didn't ask for one. What are you asking? That if somebody asks what you knew, you answer for yourself. He sighed, tired and frustrated. That is what all of this has turned into now? Everybody giving testimony? No, everybody not giving someone else's. He did not like the distinction. Before we hung up, he asked once more if I could persuade Diane not to attend. I told him the decision belonged to her. You're her niece, he said. She'll listen to you. That was precisely why I would not use the relationship that way. She doesn't owe me obedience, because I found her again. Dad went quiet. I could tell he had expected the old Samantha somewhere in that conversation, the one who heard two people might fight, and automatically began rearranging both of them. I was still afraid of the fight. I just no longer believed fear gave me the right to manage everyone who might cause it. That evening I sent Diane the meeting address and time privately because I did not want the logistics thread to become a stage for her decision. Saturday, 2 p.m. Community room in Raleigh. 2 hours reserved. You do not owe anyone attendance. You do not owe anyone forgiveness, an explanation, or a statement about the past. I'm sending this because you should have the information, not because I'm asking you to come. She read it but did not reply. I did not follow up. Aaron told me the next day that he had spoken to her again. He did not tell me what they discussed, and I did not ask. He said only that he had given her the same information and made clear he would understand if she stayed in Virginia. That was harder than it sounds. The meeting began to occupy empty spaces in my thoughts. While I checked schedules at work, I pictured Mom entering the community room and seeing Diane. While I waited in the school pickup line, I imagined Dad refusing to answer the question he had partially answered to me. At 3 a.m, I woke with the old urge to write down what everyone needed to understand before we arrived. I did not write anything. There was nothing I could prepare that would not become another form of arranging the room. Lucy knew there was going to be an adult family conversation. I told her only that much because she had noticed the extra phone calls and because pretending nothing was happening would have made her responsible for sensing it anyway. Is Grandma coming? She asked. Yes. Grandpa? Yes. Uncle Aaron? Yes. She thought for a moment. Are you going to make Grandma say sorry? No. Lucy frowned at me. I can't make her understand something, I said. I can decide what happens if she doesn't. That answer seemed to make more sense to her than it would have a month earlier. She went back to coloring a worksheet at the kitchen table. I did not tell her Diane might attend because Diane herself had not decided. I had learned enough to stop turning possibilities into information about other people. On Friday evening, the family logistics thread was almost silent. Aaron confirmed the room reservation. Dad wrote that he and Mom would be there. I confirmed. Diane had not responded to the attendance question. Mom wrote one final message. If Diane chooses not to come, I hope everyone will respect that and stop dragging her into discussions she clearly wants no part of. 3 weeks earlier, I might have answered. Aaron did not. Neither did Diane. The message sat there unsupported, a version of another person no one was willing to carry. I went to bed expecting the meeting to contain 4 people: my parents, Aaron, and me. At 7:12, the next morning, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. I was awake but had not gotten up yet. Gray January light showed through the blinds. Lucy was still asleep down the hall. For a few seconds, I watched the screen glow without reaching for it. Then I saw Diane's name. Her message contained no greeting and no explanation. "I'm coming, but I'm not coming to fight her. I'm coming so nobody can tell you what I wanted ever again." By 1:30 that Saturday afternoon, Lucy was at Aaron's house with his wife and the cousins, exactly where she had asked to be. I had not told her Diane was coming. Diane's decision had arrived that morning, and I still believed it belonged to Diane until Diane walked through the door herself. The community building looked even plainer in daylight than it had in the photographs Aaron sent. Beige brick, narrow windows, a row of winter-bare shrubs along the sidewalk. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of floor cleaner and old coffee. Someone had taped a handwritten sign beside the room number for a neighborhood tax workshop scheduled the following Tuesday. Nothing about the place suggested family history. That helped. Aaron was already there when I arrived. He had unlocked the room, turned on the lights, and then apparently made himself stop. The rectangular table stood exactly where the building staff had left it. Stackable chairs were pushed around it at uneven distances. A dry erase board covered one wall. There was no coffee, no food, no framed photographs, no seat that belonged to Dad because he had always sat there. "You didn't rearrange anything," I said. Aaron looked at the chairs. "I wanted to." "So did I." That earned the smallest smile. Then the door opened. Mom walked in first, Dad behind her. She paused just inside and took in the room with visible disappointment. She had dressed carefully, dark slacks and a cream sweater, the kind of outfit she wore when she wanted to look composed without looking formal. Dad carried a bottle of water and nothing else. Mom's eyes moved from Aaron to me. "Is Diane coming?" Before Christmas, I would have answered even if I did not know. I would have filled the silence because empty space made everyone uncomfortable. This time I said, "She can answer that." Mom's mouth tightened. At 1:57, footsteps sounded in the hallway. I knew Diane before she entered fully. Not because she looked exactly like the woman I remembered. 18 years had changed her face, softened some angles and sharpened others. Her hair was shorter now, threaded with gray. She wore a navy coat and carried no purse, only her phone and car keys. What I recognized was the way she stopped at the threshold and looked at the room before committing herself to it, as if she had learned not to enter spaces casually when other people might later claim what her presence meant. Mom went completely still. Dad stood halfway out of his chair. Aaron did not move at all. Diane looked at each of us. When she reached me, she gave one small nod. I returned it. Then she chose a chair. Not beside me. Not beside Aaron. Not across from Mom in a way that would turn the table into 2 teams. She sat near one end, with an empty chair between herself and everyone else. Mom was the first to speak. "I didn't know you were definitely coming." Diane placed her keys on the table. "I decided this morning. I wish you had told me. I told Samantha and Aaron." Mom's face changed slightly at the names. "That's what I mean. We all know this has become a problem, because people are having separate conversations and arriving with different versions of what happened." Aaron leaned forward before she could continue. "Don't include me in that. I'll say what I remember." The room went quiet. Aaron had not raised his voice or accused her of lying. He had simply removed his name from her sentence. Mom stared at him for a moment. then looked at Dad as if waiting for him to soften what had happened. Dad lowered his eyes to the bottle in his hands. Mom tried again. Fine. I am saying that everyone remembers the last few weeks differently. Aaron said, I remember what I remember. Sam can say what she remembers. Diane can say what she remembers. Dad can say what he remembers. Mom's jaw tightened. And me? You too. There was something almost absurd about how radical that sounded. No one had forbidden her to speak. No one was silencing her. We were only refusing to let her sentence arrive already, carrying 4 other voices inside it. Mom folded her arms. So what is this meeting for? I had asked myself the same question all morning. I had no speech prepared. No list of 20 grievances. No demand that anyone accept a theory about our entire childhood. I said, I want Christmas to stop being described as something nobody can know for sure. Mom looked at me. We have already discussed Christmas. We discussed what you think it meant. I'm talking about what happened. I kept it narrow. Lucy's alarm had been set for 6. Mom had changed it to 7 after I left for work. She had admitted that in writing. Dad had known and agreed, because they wanted to be gone before Lucy woke. Lucy had awakened alone. Her overnight bag had still been by the door. She had texted Mom, "Where's everyone?" Mom had answered, "Everyone agreed we'd have more fun without you." Mom opened her mouth twice during that sequence. Both times I lifted a hand, not to silence her forever, only to finish one chain of facts before interpretation entered it. Then I looked at Aaron. He spoke for himself. No one asked me whether Lucy should be left behind. I was told she was sick, and Sam had changed the plan. That's what I believed until Christmas night. Mom shifted in her chair. I never said there was a formal vote. No one answered immediately. That mattered too. In the past, one of us would have rushed into the gap and argued about whether the word agreed required a vote, whether family language was informal, whether she had been angry. This time the sentence had to stand beside the facts, without rescue. Finally, I said, "You told a 9-year-old. Everyone agreed." Aaron did not agree. He didn't even know. Mom repeated that she had been angry, that Lucy had been questioning her for weeks, and that she should not have sent the message. I agreed that the message was wrong, but not that anger changed the fact beneath it. When she asked what else I wanted, I said, "I want you to stop changing the question." Her face hardened. The question is not whether you were angry. The question is whether everyone agreed was true. She looked toward Dad. Dad did not speak. Then Mom said, "Robert and I agreed." Dad finally looked up. She changed it from 6 to 7. I knew why. I agreed we should leave before Lucy woke. Aaron shook his head once. That isn't everyone. Mom turned on him. Do you really think Lucy understood that sentence as a legal statement about every individual person in the family? No, he said. I think she understood it exactly the way a 9-year-old would. She thought all of us wanted Christmas without her. The words landed harder because Lucy was not there to carry them for us. I had deliberately kept her out of this room. She was not evidence. She was not a witness we needed to question until adults finally understood. She had already told us what the sentence did to her. Our job was to decide what we would do with that knowledge. Mom looked at me again. So you brought Diane here to prove I used the word everyone badly? Diane had been silent for nearly 20 minutes. Now she spoke. No one brought me. Mom's eyes moved to her. Diane's voice was steady. That is why I came. Mom leaned back. Then say what you came to say. Diane studied her for a moment. I did not come here to prove Samantha's Christmas story. I wasn't there. I did not come to say what happened between you and me 18 years ago is the same as what happened to Lucy. It wasn't. Mom's shoulders loosened by a fraction, as if she heard an opening. Diane continued before she could use it. But I am here because for 18 years people have repeated what I supposedly wanted. The room became very still. Diane looked at Aaron first, not Mom. When I stopped coming to Linda's house, I wanted distance from Linda. That part is true. We were fighting constantly. I was angry. I said things I regret. I did not want to keep walking into her house and having the same fight. Aaron's hands were clasped on the table. Diane said, "I did not tell anyone that I wanted to stop being your aunt." Aaron swallowed. She looked at me. I did not tell anyone I wanted to stop being Samantha's aunt either. I felt the old guilt rise, but this was not the moment to turn Diane's truth into my apology. She went on. I was told the family was exhausted by me. I was told people needed space. I was told the family would be healthier without me for a while. I believed that included both of you. I tried a few times after that, and got enough silence that eventually I stopped. Mom shook her head. That is an incredibly selective version. Diane turned toward her. Then give yours, but don't give mine. Mom's lips parted. Diane's tone did not rise. You can say I was difficult. You can say I was angry. You can say you thought I interfered. You can say you were relieved when I stopped coming over. All of that belongs to you. What does not belong to you is telling them I stopped wanting them. Aaron's face had changed. I had heard him sound stripped down after his private call with Diane. Seeing him now was different. He looked like a man trying to hold two ages in his body at once. 38 years old at a municipal table, and 20 years old being told an aunt had decided he was not worth contacting. He stared at Diane. Aaron asked whether that had ever changed later after a year, after 5. Diane's eyes filled, but she shook her head. I got used to living without you. That is not the same as wanting to. Aaron pressed his lips together. Diane took a breath. I never stopped wanting you. Nobody moved. The sentence was not dramatic in the way television makes reunions dramatic. Aaron did not get up and cross the room. Diane did not open her arms. 18 years did not disappear because 6 words finally crossed the distance. Aaron looked down at his hands. Then he nodded once. That was all he could do. It was enough for the moment. Mom broke the silence. You sent him a birthday card one year. One card. Diane, you are talking as if we built a wall around these children. Diane's expression changed. I am not measuring who tried harder. Because if we are going to talk about 18 years, then we should talk about all 18 years. I agree. Mom seemed surprised. Diane said, There were years I did nothing. There were years I was too proud. There were years I assumed they had moved on, and I told myself I had too. I am not asking anyone to pretend I stood outside the family house every Christmas begging to be let in. She looked at Aaron, then at me. I am saying one thing only. I never made the decision you were told I made. That distinction closed the door Mom had been trying to open. The room did not need Diane to be perfect. It only needed her to own her own desire. Dad had barely spoken since she entered. I watched him now. His water bottle was still unopened. He kept turning it a quarter turn between his palms, then back again. Mom noticed me looking at him. Robert has already said this was a complicated time. I said, Dad can say what Dad remembers. His hand stopped. Mom's head turned toward me. Samantha. I did not answer her. I looked at him. What did you know? Dad exhaled through his nose. I don't think turning this into a confession helps anybody. Aaron said, She didn't ask you to confess. Dad looked at him, then at Diane. For a moment I thought he would retreat into the same language he had used in the parking lot. 2 angry sisters. A difficult time. Everybody needed space. He had believed things would cool down. Instead, he put the water bottle on the table. I knew the stories didn't match. Mom's face went blank. Diane did not move. Dad continued slowly, choosing each sentence as if he could still limit the damage by making it precise. Linda told the kids you wanted distance. You told me you felt like the family had closed ranks around you. Mom interrupted. Because she was furious with me. Dad looked at her. I know. You knew I meant she wanted distance from the conflict. I know what you meant. Diane's chair made a soft sound as she shifted. Dad closed his eyes briefly. Then he said what he had not managed to say to me in the parking lot. I also knew those were not the same thing. Mom stared at him. His voice became quieter. I should have asked more questions. The room seemed to shrink around the sentence. Dad said he had told himself he was preventing another fight. Whenever he tried to raise Diane's name, Mom became angry. Whenever Diane spoke about Mom, he expected another argument. Aaron and I were young. The family was quieter after Diane stopped coming around. Months turned into a year, and by then asking what had happened felt harder than letting the new arrangement become normal. I thought staying out of it was the neutral thing, he said. Diane gave a small, sad shake of her head. Dad looked at her. I know it wasn't now. Mom's voice was sharp. So you're just going to sit there and make me responsible for 18 years while you pretend you had no part in it? Dad flinched. Then, for once, he did not calm her by agreeing that the conversation had gone too far. No, he said. I had a part in it. Mom went silent. Dad looked at Aaron and me. I knew enough to know there was a contradiction. I chose not to push because every time I did, it turned into a fight. I kept telling myself, keeping the house peaceful was protecting the family. He swallowed. It protected me from the fight. No one rescued him from that admission. Dad looked toward Diane and said, "And you paid for it?" Her face tightened, and so did mine. There was no hidden mastermind or document in the room. Dad's failure was simpler. He had seen the crack, covered it, and spent 18 years avoiding what lay underneath, because lifting it would have made the room uncomfortable. Mom stood abruptly. This is unbelievable. Her chair scraped against the floor. You are all sitting here acting like I controlled every relationship in this family. Aaron was an adult. Samantha became an adult. Diane could have called. Robert could have called. Nobody was trapped. Diane nodded. You're right. Mom stopped. Diane said, that is part of why this hurts. No one at the table had clean hands except the 9-year-old who was not in the room. Aaron and I had accepted a convenient story for too many adult years. Diane had let pride and hurt harden into silence. Dad had chosen comfort over clarity. But responsibility did not become meaningless simply because it was shared. Mom had still told each side what the other wanted. And on Christmas morning, she had done it again to a child. I looked at her. This is not about proving you caused every lost year. It's about what happens now, that we know how easily one person's voice became everyone. Mom laughed once, bitterly. And what happens now? You all punish us? The word us mattered. Dad had just separated his own responsibility from hers for the first time, and she pulled them back together in one sentence. I answered only for myself. You and Dad will not have Lucy alone. Mom's face changed. For how long? I don't know. That is not reasonable. It is what I'm doing. She looked at Dad, then back at me. You're taking her grandparents away. No, I'm changing access. If Lucy wants to see you, and she feels safe, visits can happen with me there. There will be no overnights right now. No picking her up alone. And she will never be asked to call Christmas a misunderstanding so the adults can move on. Mom's eyes filled with angry tears. Dad looked down. Aaron spoke next. My kids aren't doing overnights either for now. Mom turned toward him. Aaron. He did not look at me before continuing. That mattered. I'm not copying Sam. I'm telling you my boundary. If we make plans, I'm making them directly with the people involved. If the kids are invited somewhere, I want the invitation to come from the person actually hosting. No more everybody wants, or nobody minds. Mom stared at him as if direct logistics were an insult. Aaron added, and we're not doing every holiday automatically at your house anymore. Her face went pale. Hosting Christmas and Thanksgiving had never been a written right. No one had voted to give it to her. It had simply become part of the family structure because Linda Brooks hosted and the rest of us arrived. Aaron said, "We can rotate, or people can make their own plans, but your house is not the default because you say it is." He added, "I'll host Christmas next year. After that, whoever hosts can volunteer directly." Mom looked at me, waiting for either confirmation or betrayal. I gave neither. "I'll decide my holidays with Lucy when they come." Diane had said nothing about consequences yet. Mom turned toward her. "And what are you demanding?" Diane's expression went flat. "Nothing. You drove from Virginia to sit here after 18 years and you want nothing? I want you to stop answering questions about me." Mom shook her head in disbelief. "That's it?" "No. That's the only thing I'm asking from you." Diane picked up her keys. "What happens between Aaron and me is between Aaron and me. What happens between Samantha and me is between Samantha and me. If Robert wants a relationship with me, he can ask me. If I want one, I can answer. You do not get to accept or decline those relationships on my behalf." Mom looked around the table. "So everyone is punishing us now?" The sentence entered the room almost exactly the way it would have a month earlier. Everyone, us, one collective accusation meant to make each person wonder whether the others had secretly joined something. This time it had nowhere to go. I looked at her. "No, I'm speaking for myself. The words belonged to me, because I was no longer answering for Aaron, Diane, or Dad. I was naming only my own boundary." Mom waited, perhaps expecting Dad to object, me to soften what had been said, or Diane to turn the moment into revenge. None of us did. Diane simply sat there with her keys in front of her. Mom picked up her coat from the back of the chair. "This is not a family anymore." No one answered. She looked at Dad. He remained seated. That was the moment that hurt her most. I saw it immediately. For decades, Dad had followed the emotional movement of the room. If Mom left a dinner angry, he followed. If she ended a conversation, he helped close it. If someone needed to be told enough was enough, his quiet voice gave her decision the weight of moderation. She stood beside the door and waited half a second too long. "Robert?" Dad looked at her. "I'm going to sit here a minute." Her face hardened. Then she looked at Aaron. He stayed in his chair. She looked at me. Every old instinct in my body knew what came next. Follow her into the hallway. Tell her nobody hated her. Explain that this was not permanent. Make sure she could drive while upset. Promise to call tomorrow. Give the exit a softer meaning so the family would still have somewhere to return. I gripped the edge of my chair under the table. Mom opened the door. No one followed her. When I picked Lucy up from Aaron's house that Saturday, I did not tell her that her grandmother had left the meeting alone. I did not tell her that Grandpa had stayed in his chair, or that Aunt Diane had sat at a table with people she had not seen in about 18 years and said she never stopped wanting them. Those facts belonged to the adults who had lived them. What Lucy needed from me was simpler. I told her the meeting was over, that the boundaries we had discussed were still in place, and that nobody had made any decisions about her without asking me. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Did Grandma say sorry?" "Not in a way I'm ready to bring to you yet." Lucy accepted that more easily than I expected. She had spent the first days after Christmas waiting for adults to produce one sentence that would undo the mourning. By January, she seemed to understand what I was only beginning to understand myself. An apology was not a magic door, back to the room as it had been before. The first real test came 4 days later. Mom texted while I was at work and asked whether she could pick Lucy up from school on Friday, take her for hot chocolate, and keep her until dinner. She wrote as if the meeting had established a cooling-off period rather than a boundary. She added that Lucy had always loved their Friday afternoons, and that taking those away was punishing a child for adult conflict. For several minutes, I stared at the message and felt the old machinery start up inside me. I could explain again why the boundary existed. I could quote Dad's admission. I could remind her of the alarm, the text, the lie about everyone. I could write 6 paragraphs until no reasonable person could misunderstand me. Instead, I wrote, "If Lucy wants to see you, I will be there. She will not be picked up or kept alone right now." Mom replied almost immediately that I was being extreme. I did not answer. She tried again 20 minutes later. She was Lucy's grandmother. She had helped raise her after my husband died. One terrible morning should not erase years of love. That message hurt because the years of love were real. I did not need to deny them to protect Lucy from what had happened, so I did not argue with that either. I simply repeated the boundary once. If Lucy wants a visit, we can arrange one with me present. Nothing changed because Mom disliked the answer. That was new. Aaron called me that evening, not about my conversation with Mom, but about his own. She had invited his children for an overnight the following weekend, as if his boundary at the meeting had been an emotional statement rather than an actual change in access. He had declined. Mom told him I was obviously influencing him. "What did you say?" I asked. "That I made my own decision." I smiled into the phone. He added, "And then I hung up before I started proving it." That mattered more than if he had defended me for 20 minutes. His boundary was not an alliance with mine. It was his. For the rest of January, our family became less dramatic and more awkward. That was an improvement nobody would have put on a greeting card. Mom stopped calling every day. Dad called occasionally, usually with practical questions that did not need to be practical. Had my car been making that noise again? Did Lucy still need help with the shelf in her room? Was I working the first weekend in February? I recognized the questions as attempts at contact, but I stopped turning them into more than they were. The first supervised visit with my parents happened at a diner Lucy liked because she chose it. I told her she did not have to go. She wanted to. She also wanted me to sit beside her rather than across the table, so I did. Mom arrived carrying a small gift bag even though I had asked for no presents. Inside was a book Lucy had mentioned before Christmas and a pair of fuzzy socks. I saw the old temptation in Lucy's face. Gratitude mixed with uncertainty, as if accepting something kind might require her to declare everything fixed. I told her she could say thank you without deciding anything else. Dad seemed to hear that even though I was speaking to her. The meal was uncomfortable. Mom asked about school, a class project a friend Lucy had mentioned months earlier. She avoided Christmas completely. Dad did too until the check was already on the table. Then Lucy asked him a question no adult had prepared. "Why did you leave if you knew Grandma changed the alarm?" Dad looked at me first. I did not answer for him. He looked back at Lucy. For once, he did not begin with how soon I would have been home or how little danger he thought there was. He said, "Because I agreed with something I should not have agreed with." Lucy waited. Dad swallowed. I thought avoiding an argument was more important than it was. Mom shifted beside him. "We both made a bad decision." Lucy looked at her. "Did you think I would be happier when I woke up?" Mom's face tightened. I could see her searching for a version that would make intent easier to carry. "No," she said finally. "I was angry with you. It was not a full apology. It was not enough to restore trust, but it was more honest than how the message sounded." Lucy did not forgive her at the table. She ate the last of her fries and asked if we could go home. We did. After that, visits happened when Lucy wanted them, not because Friday arrived. Some months there were 2. Some months there were none. There were no overnights. Mom asked more than once when I planned to move forward, and I told her I was moving forward. Forward simply did not mean back to the old arrangement. Dad changed more slowly and in smaller ways. He stopped using Mom as the opening sentence of every difficult conversation. One night in March, he called after Lucy was asleep and told me he had been thinking about the meeting. He said that for years he had treated silence as the absence of conflict, and he had begun to understand that silence could simply mean the conflict had been moved onto the person with less power to challenge it. I did not praise him for saying it. I also did not dismiss it. "That sounds important," I said. He was quiet. "It would have been more important 18 years ago." "Yes." He did not ask me to soften the answer. Mom's changes were harder to see. She stopped using the word everyone with me for a while, but not because she had suddenly accepted what it had done. More often, she talked about what she had lost. She missed having the grandchildren at her house. She hated that Aaron no longer called before making plans with me. She hated that holiday decisions appeared in a shared thread instead of arriving through her. When she talked about Christmas, she still spent more time on the damage to the family than on the sentence Lucy had read alone. I stopped trying to force insight out of her. The consequence did not depend on whether she understood it perfectly. Diane's return was nothing like a reunion movie. Aaron called her some weeks and not others. Sometimes she answered. Sometimes she sent a message saying she was busy and would call later, then did. Once she did not call later at all. Aaron told me this with enough disappointment in his voice that I almost offered to contact her. The old Sam got as far as opening Diane's message thread. Then I closed it. "Ask her," I told Aaron. "I did." "Then you have your answer for now." He sighed. "I hate this new version of you." "No, you hate that I'm not useful in the old way." He laughed. "Because by then we could sometimes recognize the pattern without turning every recognition into a wound." In April, Diane chose a small cafe in Raleigh and met Aaron there for lunch, just the two of them. I knew because Aaron told me afterward, not because I arranged it. He said it was awkward and emotional in places, and neither of them tried to turn one meal into 18 years of repair. In June, she came again and asked whether Lucy and I wanted to meet her for ice cream. I asked Lucy. Lucy asked if Diane was the aunt. Grandma had said did not want the family. Yes. Was Grandma wrong? Yes. Lucy thought about that, and then said she wanted to meet her. The meeting lasted 45 minutes. Diane did not arrive carrying 18 years of affection she expected Lucy to return. She asked about school, laughed when Lucy complained about long division, and told her the only thing she needed to call her was whatever felt comfortable. Lucy chose Aunt Diane by the end of the cup, but more because she liked the sound of it than because anyone asked. When Diane left, she hugged me quickly and told me she would be back in touch. She was. Not constantly. That was enough. By summer, the family logistics thread had become boring, which was the best proof that it worked. Birthday times, school plays, a barbecue, who was bringing ice, who actually planned to attend. If someone had not answered, nobody announced what their silence meant. Aaron once wrote that Diane probably could not make a cookout, then deleted the message himself and replaced it with, "Diane, are you coming?" She answered, "No, but thanks for asking me." No one explained her no. The world continued. Thanksgiving was the first holiday that made the change impossible to dismiss. For as long as I could remember, Thanksgiving had belonged to Mom's house before invitations were even discussed. In 2027, Aaron asked in the family thread whether anyone wanted to host. I waited. Nobody volunteered immediately. The silence sat there. Then I wrote that Lucy and I could host if people did not mind squeezing into our smaller dining room. Aaron said yes. Diane said she would think about it. Dad asked what he could bring. Mom said nothing for almost a day. When she finally replied, she wrote that she had already bought what she needed for Thanksgiving dinner and had assumed the family would be at their house as usual. Nobody argued about the assumption. Aaron wrote, "We're going to Sam's this year. You and Dad are invited if you want to come." The invitation was direct. The choice was theirs. Dad accepted and offered to bring rolls. Mom waited another 6 hours before saying they would come. Thanksgiving at my house was imperfect. My table was too small, so I borrowed a folding one and pushed it against the end. Mom brought a pie despite being asked only for vegetables. She looked uncomfortable sitting in a chair that had no history attached to her. Twice she stood automatically to help me rearrange serving dishes, and twice I told her I had it. Not sharply, just clearly. Diane declined Thanksgiving. She had plans with friends in Virginia. Mom started to say, "Of course she," then stopped. Everyone heard the unfinished sentence. No one completed it for her. Dad changed the subject by asking Lucy about school. That small act would not have impressed anyone watching from outside. Inside our family, it was a structural change. The next boundary test came in early December, when Mom asked what we were doing for Christmas. I asked who she meant. She did not appreciate the question. She said she meant the family. I told her Aaron had mentioned hosting Christmas Day at his house, and that I was waiting for his invitation like everyone else. Mom said Christmas had always been at their house except for the resort year. The resort year. That was what she called it now. Not the year they left Lucy. Not the year of the changed alarm. I let the phrase pass without correcting it, because the decision did not depend on her wording. Aaron invited Lucy and me, Diane, and several relatives directly. He did not invite Mom and Dad to the main Christmas Day gathering. When he told me, I asked once whether he was sure. Yes. I did not ask him to reconsider. He said he planned to see them separately the weekend before. He did not want Christmas Day to become another test of whether Mom could tolerate being a guest in a room she did not control. It was his house and his decision. I respected it. My decision about my parents was separate. Lucy wanted to see them before Christmas. So on December 23, I invited them to my house for a 90-minute supervised gift visit. I was there the entire time. Dad gave Lucy a small telescope he had found after she mentioned astronomy at Thanksgiving. Mom gave her a sweater and asked whether she could hug her before doing it. Lucy said yes. The visit was not warm enough to pretend nothing had happened, and not cold enough to call the relationship dead. That was the truth of it. When the 90 minutes were up, I walked them to the door. Mom asked whether she would see us Christmas Day. No. Her eyes filled. So this is permanent. I didn't say that. It's been a year, Samantha. I know. How long are you going to make us pay? I looked at her for a moment. A year earlier, that question would have pulled me into a defense. I would have tried to prove I was not cruel. I would have listed every visit, every invitation, every chance she had been given. I would have explained that consequences were not punishment, until one of us was exhausted. Instead, I said, I'm not deciding Christmas so you feel punished or forgiven. I'm deciding where Lucy and I are going. Mom looked away. I wished she understood the difference. I no longer needed her to understand it before I lived by it. Christmas morning in 2027 was quiet at our house for all the ordinary reasons. Lucy 10 now slept past 7 because no one had set an alarm. There was nowhere she had to be before she was ready. I made coffee. She opened 2 gifts in pajamas and spent 20 minutes trying to assemble a small star projector without reading the instructions. At 11, we drove to Aaron's. His house was already noisy when we arrived. His children were arguing about a card game in the living room. His wife was trying to keep a pan of rolls from burning. Someone had left 2 coats on the stairs. There was no seating chart, no polished table waiting for approval, no host moving people into the places they had occupied for years. There was simply a house filling up. Diane arrived just after noon. She came alone and carried a store-bought pecan pie, because she had learned enough about our family to know homemade food could accidentally become a performance. Aaron opened the door. For a second they stood facing each other with that same awkward distance they still had sometimes. Then he stepped aside. Come in. She did. No one announced what her presence meant. No one called it healing. No one said the family was finally whole. Aaron showed her where to put the pie and asked whether she wanted coffee. Diane said later. She chose a seat near the window, while the children moved around her. When one of Aaron's sons asked how long she was staying, she said, "Until I'm ready to leave." He accepted that as a perfectly normal answer. I almost laughed. The dining table was not big enough for everyone. Aaron brought in a folding table from the garage and attached it badly enough that one end sat half an inch lower than the other. Lucy noticed and slid a folded piece of cardboard under the leg. "There," she said. "Now there's room." The words stopped me for half a second. Not because they recreated Christmas before. They did not. Nobody had been pushed into a hallway. Nobody was being rescued. A table was simply too small, so people changed the table. Lucy moved on before I did. That was how I knew the memory no longer owned every room she entered. Dinner was loud and slightly overcooked in places. Diane and Aaron disagreed about whether a movie from their childhood had been funny. They did not turn the disagreement into proof of whether their reconnection was working. Lucy sat between two cousins and corrected one of them about a science fact, with the same direct confidence that had once made Mom call her exhausting. Nobody told her children should stay out of adult matters. After we ate, people carried plates wherever there was space. Aaron's wife started coffee. Diane helped one of the kids find a missing game piece under the couch. I stood in the kitchen rinsing serving spoons and realized I had gone almost an hour without checking the emotional temperature of the room. I had not counted who was quiet. I had not noticed who needed soothing. I had not planned how to keep the next conversation from becoming uncomfortable. The realization did not feel triumphant. It felt like putting down something heavy and discovering my hands still remembered its shape. Lucy came into the kitchen, carrying 2 empty glasses. She set them beside the sink, then stayed there. "What?" I asked. She leaned against the counter. For a moment, I thought she was going to ask whether we could leave early, or whether there was dessert left. Instead, she looked toward the dining room. Diane was laughing at something Aaron had said. One cousin was crawling under the table for a dropped napkin. People were talking in separate conversations that overlapped without anyone trying to gather them into one official family voice. Lucy looked back at me. "Mom? Yeah?" Her question was quieter than it had been the first time, but I recognized it immediately. Did everyone really agree? A year earlier, I had stood in a hospital corridor with that question on my phone, and no answer I trusted. Now I did. No. That was the lie.